Holy cow, are those Tokyo trains on time. Welcome back, Monica.
Let's bring Lakeisha up.
Yeah, where's Lakeisha? Oh,
She's
I see.
there.
I'm sorry, whole bunch of people. I didn't even recognize her new photo.
Profile. Yeah, she
Morning.
changed it back.
Good morning.
Hey, no, it was from an earlier session. I'd forgotten to change it.
We almost missed you.
Get Sarah and Vinay up here.
Agoni's up.
This is becoming
Sarah.
signature music now, Tyler.
I know, right?
Theme song.
Coincidence, one of my favorite tracks of the past few years should become the theme song. So welcome back, everybody. Let's jump into this. Oh, there it is, top of the hour, Tokyo train style. We got to start. No waiting.
Let's do this.
No waiting for nobody. And for those who are wondering what we're referring to, European Germans and Swiss folks pride themselves that the trains run on time, but some people have done the math, and it turns out that the Tokyo trains embarrass everybody else on the planet in terms of arriving and departing on time, because you actually get fined if you're late there. So if you get into work even
by the seconds.
Yeah, by the seconds. The trains are accurate to the second. You can literally set your clocks to the trains.
Wow.
And it's the busiest train stations in the world in central Tokyo. The Shinjuku station, how many millions of people? I don't know, 10 million people use Shinjuku every day?
Yep, there are people who lived here for a while and they still get lost, like me.
It's huge. It's bigger than many cities, for sure. There's many shopping malls, there's got to be hundreds of trains that come in and out of there. Anyway, it's massive. And like she said, there's people who live there for years who still get lost in it because it's so massive. But Shinjuku Station, even as big and as chaotic as it is, the trains run on the second. It's really, really, really impressive. And it's kind of a fun thing to do if you ever find yourself, hey, Tomoko-san, when you're waiting for a train, it's a fun thing to do to open your, very atomically accurate clock and watch the train pull up and stop right on the second. It's kind of one of the fun things you get to do living in Tokyo. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of regulars hiding in the audience today. Let's get Lale, Mobuana's trying to hang out down there. We'll get Urban up here. So,
and Tyler, you were talking
yes.
about the 600 kilometer per hour Chinese train. Apparently, They are 3 kilometer per hour short of the Japanese fastest one. The Japanese fastest is 603 kilometer per hour.
Oh well, I'm sure they will adjust for that. I'm sure they will fix that. Yeah, they're not going to stand to lose that race with Japan anytime soon. So the biggest headlines of this very moment, and a very happy Wednesday, July 21st. Here are the biggest headlines at this very moment. Netflix reports their Q2 revenues, because now it's July, so Q2 is officially over, and a lot of the publicly traded stocks are doing their earnings reports, and so the stocks get a little bit volatile this time of year when all the companies start doing their reports. And do we think Netflix revenue exceeded or did not exceed estimates? That's the question. So let me just unpack this for people who've never traded stocks before. And when these companies report their quarterly earnings, for example, Netflix had a revenue of $7.34 billion over the last 3 months. God damn, that they are getting big. That's a lot of revenue for
3 months. That's
3
like
months.
that's like most.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for 3 months. So $7.34 billion for the quarter. That may or may not be a lot. What's important is what was estimated that they would make. Because whatever there's an official estimate number that's kind of a collection of the consensus of the market. The market thought they were going to make X. And now it's been revealed they actually made 7.34, which may be more or less than what was assumed, the estimate. right? If they make more than was the estimate, then the stock goes up. If they make less than the estimate, the stock goes down.
It
Make
was
sense?
slightly ahead of estimates on the revenue. I have the numbers if you need them. So.
I'm looking right at them, 7.34 versus 7.32. But I'm just trying to teach the class how earnings
Got it.
seasons work.
Got it.
Yeah. So right now, Netflix did theirs, and now you're going to have all the other companies are going to be coming out with theirs, Apple and Facebook and everybody. And the big question is, do the companies exceed estimates? And if everyone exceeds estimates, the entire stock market goes up. Because, by the way, the tech companies are driving the stock market now. Because the biggest companies on the planet are Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Tesla moves the market quite a bit as well. So watching these tech companies has become more important than ever now that they've passed, the pharmaceuticals and the oils, and they're in a whole new league all of their own, and they're driving the whole market. So I've been trading tech, as Faraz knows, I've been trading tech stocks since the companies IPO'd. So to me, it's been really interesting to watch them go from little IPOs to leading the whole market, and the whole market is now influenced heavily by them. So it's kind of interesting to watch. But it should not surprise anybody that Netflix exceeded estimates. And by the way, as soon as they launched this whole video games thing that we've been talking about, which Aaron's obviously dialed into, and the fact that we're going into VR and 360 video, and what is 360 video? It's when you put on a headset and now you're inside the goddamn movie, like you're standing next to Tom Hanks, on stage in this three-dimensional play. That's going to blow people away. And Hollywood actually has a chance to reinvent itself, and it's a fortunate coincidence that a lot of the best game developer outfits in the world are also in Marina del Rey. They're not far from Hollywood, and in Stockholm as well. So Stockholm and Hollywood have a huge chance to revolutionize the future of Netflix with 360 video content, and then the games thing, just regular video games, the future of video games and VR experiences. And this is something not a lot of people are talking about, is movies today are two-dimensional and you cannot interact with them really. But we have to imagine that VR experiences, I guess you could call them video games, it's something in between. What is something in between a Harry Potter movie and a Harry Potter game that you can walk into in VR? A VR Harry Potter game, but the quality of how video games today even have moments of drama where the gameplay stops and the two characters start talking to each other and share relevant information about, how you're supposed to go about the next part of the game, right? Any gamer knows exactly what I'm talking about. But anyway, that's how, if you're not a video game player, what's happening lately is you're playing the video game and all of a sudden you see a character on the screen who has like a blue heart flashing above their head, and you're like, oh, what's that all about? So you walk over to the character with the blue heart flashing above their head, and now the character, all of a sudden the game kind of stops, the gameplay stops, you're safe, no one can kill you, and now it turns into almost like a little movie. And your character and that character with the blue heart start talking to each other, and that character starts telling you very important information about the rest of the gameplay. And they're like, Colonel McDouglas is actually a spy, and now we got to go kill him. And oh shit, okay, who's Colonel McDouglas? And then here's what he looks like. We got to find him. I think he's underneath the boat, hidden under the ocean. Okay, so I guess we got to get in a boat and go under the ocean and find this guy. And so now you have more understanding of what the rest of the game is going to entail. And then you bump into another character who tells you that character with the blue heart was actually a spy. Now you're really conflicted, and the dramas in these video games get very complicated, like most Hollywood blockbuster films do.
Hey, Tyler, I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I'm curious about something.
And
Having covered the sector on Wall Street, for a long time.
Yeah.
If Netflix had not gotten only recently into video games, would you even consider them a tech company? Because most of my colleagues on Wall Street wouldn't consider Netflix a tech company. We'd almost consider it a movie studio. I
Right.
mean, it would actually be closer to MGM than Activision or even Apple.
Wild. Yeah. No, I see your point. I mean, there's quite a few companies like that border on are they tech or not. And to me, it really comes down to are they writing lots of code? Are they focusing on software? Are they, you know, um, yeah. It's. I mean, in the case of like YouTube, we definitely would say they're a tech company because of the ad network aspect of it involves a lot of data science and algorithms and optimizing the video. They're consuming a lot of data and using that data. That's why I like calling them data companies because it's
Yeah, big
um,
time.
Netflix is
And Tyler,
definitely
you
Netflix is definitely a data company. It's like a as you said, Ken, correctly. It's a movie studio that runs on data, or it's a data company that is taken on the genre of a movie studio. Is another way to think of it. But
You heard what
Tyler.
Barry Diller said at the Allen conference about Netflix and algorithms. Did you hear
no,
that one?
no.
Oh, okay. So Barry Diller, which I thought was, I'll give you my commentary on it. He made a kind of a slanted comment against Netflix, saying that they're making movies, anything that fits in 100 minutes, based on algorithms, and basically implying that when they do a movie, it's all based on an algorithm and what they think is going to work, and it's not based on the old fashioned creativity of storytelling. And I just found that interesting because a lot of people don't know this, but I'm gonna, before Barry Diller was doing IAC and before he did Paramount, before he did Fox, Barry Diller was, an executive at ABC, and he's credited with coming up with something called the ABC Movie of the Week, which essentially was a movie made for television that not only was less than 100 minutes because it was a 90-minute time slot, including commercials, so it was even less than that. And so I mean, he had movies under 100 minutes, under 100 minutes, not even at 100 minutes, and that ran for years, and it's mostly from like the 1970s, and it was very successful. It was one of they and NBC, but ABC actually beat them at it. We're making like original movies for television. Most people may have seen it in reruns. Like one of their most famous one was Brian's Song with Billy D. Williams and James Caan. That was an ABC Movie of the Week. It was not something that they bought. It wasn't like getting a rerun of The Wizard of Oz, and playing it on TV. They made that specifically for TV. So I thought it was, kind of a not a fair comment he made about it, but that was his comment.
Hmm.
It was about the algorithms.
Okay, so there was a couple ladies trying to jump in here. What was that?
Actually, Tyler, this is Lola. Sorry,
Hey,
this is a side thing. Faraz wants to come to the stage and he has things to say, but apparently he cannot come.
okay,
He has raised his hand, he says. Thanks so much.
okay. If somebody's blocking our friend Faraz, if you could unblock him for the time being, that would be most appreciated.
Hey, Tyler,
And
you're the only moderator here.
that's right, because Cal is missing them. Yeah, but if somebody's blocking him, they can unblock him.
Can you,
Kind of,
he raised his hand already. Can you see
He's
him?
in the room.
okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
he's in
yeah.
the room.
Oh, then he should be able to get on stage. Raise your
I
hand,
think his
Faraz.
picture changed.
Let's see. Maybe he's using a separate account, or maybe maybe it's a separate. He had to use a separate account to get in, perhaps.
Yeah, he thinks
Faraz, you go out the room and come in again.
No, he's the
Now,
second guy. He's the second guy in the followed by the speakers section.
Yeah.
not for me. He's not. Hold on.
Okay.
Oh, there he is. I got him.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Okay,
Thank
so
team
you,
effort.
Tyler.
other comments about this first headline, which is that Netflix did exceed estimates, and U.S. and Canada region lost 433,000 subs. That's interesting. Netflix reported earnings that missed on the bottom line. The company's revenue and global paid net subscriber additions beat estimates. Okay.
Yeah,
And then there's a secondary headline around Netflix at the moment, which says Netflix says its expansion into gaming will start with mobile games. Interesting. which will be included with a subscription at no additional cost. Okay, and why is now? Check this out. Again, just a little extra education on how these big companies work, and they know when they're going to do these quarterly reports, which they're all having to do right now, that Wall Street, it's kind of like students going into class to the teacher, and Wall Street is the teacher, and you're either going to get punished or
That's good.
celebrated for what you did for the past 3 months. And when you come in to do your book report for the teacher every 3 months, they know the whole world's going to be looking at them and how they did over the past 3 months, and they want to bring in additional good news, especially if they didn't do so well the past 3 months. And so Netflix has been hiring a lot around games, and they started this, about a month ago. We started seeing headlines that they hired this gaming person and that gaming person and everything else. And Netflix might have known, even right as the quarter started, that this quarter was not going to be a really strong quarter because it's summer. First of all, they probably knew that might be part of it. And they might have said, you know what, we know this isn't going to be a really strong quarter. Like Wall Street, the teacher's going to kick our ass because, we might be a C student this quarter. But if we come in and we announce we're going into video games, oh boy, that will save us. No one's going to short our stock if we announce we're going into a whole new category.
But
So let's go hire some really awesome folks. That doesn't take a whole lot of work and effort. I mean, and it can save it'll save the ass whooping we're going to get from the teacher when we're going into our book report. That can be, that's one way to watch these tech stocks, or as I have, because when I start seeing companies, and the thought did go through my mind with Netflix when they were mentioning going into games. It's like, why are you going into games now? Well, it's smart that they do, but it means that the traditional business is getting a little more friction. They're starting to encounter more friction in their conventional business, because if they weren't getting any friction in their conventional business and they were growing as they always had, there's no point in focusing on chapter 2 yet, right? You're still growing as fast as you can grow. It's still open terrain. You're still picking the low-hanging fruit off the tree as fast as you can. There's no point in thinking about getting a ladder and going up to the higher parts of the tree. So the fact when they say, we've got this whole idea, what if we got a ladder and started picking fruit higher up on the tree? It's like, well, why are you even thinking about that unless the apples on the lower part of the tree are starting to dry up? And that's what's happening, is this subscription battle. And we know that now to be true because it says they lost subscribers in US and Canada. That means the apples on the lower part of the tree are now drying up.
And those losses were more than expected, despite what they
Right.
said. But I'll give you a positive stat, which is not as widely reported, that you'll be very interested in, because we discussed this before about just getting more time of people of the day. Engagement, which is time spent per member per household per day for Netflix, was up 17% versus pre-pandemic Q2 2019 levels. So and that's
It's
you know
substantial. Yes,
yeah.
because they
Can,
have a
can
hold on one sec, Chris. That's a profound point that Ken's bringing up, because the way they look at it, the way Netflix and YouTube and TikTok and Snapchat look at it, they are competing for a limited number of minutes of your eyes each day. So if they can increase viewership 17%, like average viewer time, average listener time, average per session goes up. The average listening session might be an hour. If they can increase the average listening session to an hour and 17 minutes, that's huge. That means YouTube and TikTok and Instagram and Facebook lost minutes generally. That there's a limited number of minutes in the day. So capturing more of that market share of time of eyeballs is a huge battle, and one they focus on tremendously. And that's where it plays in directly to the quality of the content, and more importantly, the quality of the algorithm to recommend the content, which is what TikTok has proven to be most masterful at.
And just let me be clear, that's a global statistic. That was their numbers for the whole world because Netflix is a very global company. So most of their growth for the last at least 2-3 years has actually been international. So a lot of these companies, you always have to think about, when they report, what's domestic and what's global, because they're, and not confuse them. So that's a global number I just gave you.
Cool.
So,
Go ahead.
Ken, one question I had, or if anybody else knows, if I remember correctly, like maybe 6 months ago or more, Netflix was mentioning stopping the account sharing. Is that still something that's in the blocks, or?
That's yeah, I have to assume that they did. Let's ping in Ade, who works at Netflix, to ask him. And for those who are, if you know who Ada is, you are a true OG tech news around the worlder. Ade
Of
and
course.
yes, of course Cheryl does. Cheryl and I and Cal and a few others in the room, have been here from the beginning, from day one. And Ada was here for the first month or so, the first 30, 40, 50, 60 times we did this. He works at Netflix, and he due to the fact that he's a fantastic developer at Netflix, he was getting recruited constantly, even by some of the social audio apps, I guess we could say it that way. So so he's in high demand, and so he's had to now spend a little less time in Clubhouse, unfortunately. But he was like rocking Clubhouse back when, a year ago. Aaron?
Yeah, Tyler, if we take the way sometimes you like to expand a thesis a bit, if we take it that, Netflix, looking at their numbers, looking at them expanding mobile gaming as part of the subscriptions, and then if we think about what Zuckerberg said at Viva Tech in Paris recently, that, in the future we're not going to need TV screens, we're not going to need
Yep.
mobile phones, we're not going to need these pieces of hardware. You can really see where Netflix are taking to Ken's point, their previously movie studio and TV programs directly into that immersive experience world of AR, VR. So they're getting ready for when Apple release AR glasses and VR glasses, and everybody's going to start watching things through those immersive experiences.
hmm
They're just preparing themselves to go right into that world, aren't they?
Yeah, I think and Reed, the CEO, is very clever and staying ahead of the curve. The other point, because Chris actually raised a really good point, which was the account sharing thing. And when there was a headline, I don't know, 3 months ago, Chris, where Netflix says we're going to start cracking down on account sharing, right? Remember that?
Yep.
And at that time, Ada worked at Netflix, or still does. And we said, Ada, what's
Do
this
you
all
think that
about? Huh? Yeah. And we asked him, first of all, is it true? And what's going on? He says, yes, it is true. But traditionally, we didn't care if you were sharing your account with your family and, your friends or whatever. It wasn't a big deal because they got bigger things to worry about, like capturing the market, so like, adding more subscribers. They're just going, collecting all those apples on the low hanging part of the tree. And when they said that they were going to start cracking down, it's because they've gone into many international markets. And in some international markets, they said they have entire cities sharing the account, where it's like 50 people sharing the account who aren't really friends with each other, or even know each other, and people are making a business out of it where they pay for the account and then they sell out a timeshare of, everyone, who wants 2 hours on Wednesday, okay, and they sell that off. Who wants 4 hours on Friday, okay, and we sell that out, and they actually monetize the account, and they can see that in the
That's
data.
creative.
Yeah.
Tyler,
Yes.
Tyler,
So
it's
they're
MA. Oh,
the whole
sorry.
point of canceling of cracking down on account sharing was not about your typical American home usage. They're quite okay with that. It was the people making businesses. What's up, man?
Tyler, just really quick. In Europe, I mean, obviously they have the premium account, right? The Spotify premium account that allows you to share it with like five people in your household, and that is a subscription service that's in Europe specifically. I don't know if I believe it's in the U.S. as well that you could share, but also by the IP addresses that you're logging in now, it's also being able to see if you're sharing it as you just stated.
Mm-hmm.
Correct or no? Because wouldn't the IP address tell that, like with a person logging in? Couldn't they just make that? Yeah, couldn't Netflix just align that so that people wouldn't be able to log in with multiple? at multiple times. Because I know in Europe it started to happen when I was logging into my brother-in-law's account that I share with the US with him, because he works for Paramount Pictures and they get like all these discounts and stuff. But it's very interesting because I couldn't log into his account. I was always getting an error. So it wouldn't let me log into his account in the United States. But I think that has jurisdictions on what they show in the US and what they show in Europe. Does Netflix have the jurisdictions to show certain films in the US and certain films and licenses in Europe? They're not the same?
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sure there is that. Yeah. Yeah, some content is country specific for sure. Yeah.
And I also wonder what the relative pricing is by country. So if it's $15, $14.95 in the US market, I mean, I think that appeals to, many different segments of the population. If it's $15 in other countries, where let's say the average worker makes $10 a day, then it's relatively more expensive. So, I mean, I would imagine that they've taken that into account, but I do wonder. I mean, and then some countries, there's just less of a regard for intellectual property, and there's a lot of hustling that drives the economy. I mean, I'm not condoning it, but I am really curious about the relative pricing structure. Back in the day, there was kind of the relative pricing of a Big Mac, and so, that's why you would go to some cities and McDonald's was like semi, fine dining, as
Yeah.
opposed to, a place that you drive through and grab a 99-cent burger. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's
Starbucks
really
as well.
interesting.
Starbucks in much of
Absolutely.
the
I was going
world
to
is
add,
like, yeah.
Tyler and Lakeisha, I was going to say, yeah, like living in Tanzania, you do need, I use VPN a lot to get different content. For example, UK Netflix versus US Netflix get different content. I should mention that actually in emerging markets like in the continent of Africa, people can afford some middle class and above can afford Netflix, but they're not priced in their local currency, and more importantly, there's no local payments for them. So Netflix have not connected up, and maybe they don't want to yet. Too much work to connect up mobile money, right? Because again, everyone has PayPal or Visa, MasterCard. But there are startups, surprisingly, coming up in Africa that try and give you like a payment layer where they say, hey, we'll give you Xbox Pass, iTunes, Netflix. So I think there's some friction there. And also the other thing as well is that Netflix did open up in Nigeria. So they're starting to produce some Nigerian content. And I do get some pretty good Nigerian movies on
I
Netflix here in
get them over
Tanzania.
here in Bangkok too. Yeah.
Yeah, South Africa also, there is some good content there. So they're pushing with new content. That there's some friction around payments that they need to solve, I believe, to get it there as well. And then the other the different spin, I've always admired Netflix for not creating their own hardware. As far as I'm aware, they don't have their own hardware. But my prediction is that they buy Roku. It looks very juicy target for them to buy, to be honest, particularly if they decide that the hardware path is helpful. And then one final thing is that my dad, who's like in his 80s and he's pretty tech savvy, and I bought him an Apple TV. The other day he called me and said, I lost my Netflix remote. I just laughed. I said, what do you mean you lost your Netflix remote? It's like, no, my Netflix remote. Can you get me a new one? I'm like, you mean your Apple TV remote? It's like, oh, is it Apple TV you bought me for my birthday 2 years ago? I'm like, yes. It's like, oh, well, I need a Netflix remote. I'm like, that's how much he uses Netflix and above everything else, partly because all the other options are blocked for him. Like Apple TV content isn't available there. Amazon Prime isn't available as much. HBO certainly isn't in Tanzania. So Netflix is actually pretty popular if you can get access to it. And it's quite funny that my dad thinks that his Apple TV is a Netflix machine. And of course, you have the TVs that are being sold in Africa, which increasingly have Netflix embedded. So yeah, just some thoughts on emerging markets in Africa. Like I think that they have a long way to go to make things here, and there's opportunity I think for startups to help with the friction, or maybe even content help create some of the content which will fuel growth in emerging markets. They can't just assume that only American blockbusters will work here.
Which brings the discussion back to hardware needed or not, because again I remember also at the time that the Apple TV for some reason basically pushed out YouTube. You couldn't have the Apple TV anymore, and then they came back. In the same sense, of course, now as Apple is pushing for their own content much further and really competing with Netflix, that might be a problem in the future for Netflix not having
Okay,
devices.
so number 2 headline. That was number 1. Number 2 in the top 10 is Instagram is rolling out a new feature that lets users control sensitive content in the Explore tab, which is where that's where their algorithm is in the Explore tab, and they recommend all kinds of stuff they think you will find interesting, and some of it might be sensitive content, and now they're letting users control the sensitive content in the Explore tab with settings to allow or limit even more content in the Explore tab, so that you can inform the algorithm not to show as much of X or some particular content, and you can limit even more if you really don't want to see cat videos, for example. So yeah, it's to do feedback for its own algorithm, that to personalize the algorithm for you, which of course is very helpful for them in optimizing their algorithm. It's a win-win. And I wonder if that even informs the algorithms over in Facebook land. That's the interesting question to me. But yeah, it makes sense. There's not too much to that, I guess. Anyone have a quick comment on that? It says Instagram now has a slider you can use to determine how much sensitive content you want to see. An experiment in putting content moderation in the hands of users. I like this approach, says Casey Newton at The Verge. And today, Facebook/Instagram announced sensitive content control for Instagram, and everyone seems to actually like it. Users like the idea of being more in control of the content they're being sent through the algorithms. It does not, yeah,
It's
it
maybe
does not
something.
yet let you set
Sorry.
your levels differently for different kinds of content. In other words, you can't make it more strict on violence and more pervasive on sex or vice versa, according to one user who has seen it. And Michelle, working at Facebook as you do, maybe you knew this was coming, or have any thoughts on content, letting users adjust their own the algorithms, personalizing the content that they see? Maybe not. She said, "Hey, Emma."
Hey, Tyler. I think maybe one of the things that does sound interesting to me about that particularly is how you could adjust what you see in terms of different points in the, like if you, let's say you're doing a content calendar, you're doing some content creation and you're working on different streams of business, right? So let's say you're a content creator for different types of information or different types of support, right? Education. I think this is also very interesting because you see a lot of stuff kind of flashing, some announcements, and it's very sort of black and white. But maybe there is something you're working on that might attract people that the algorithm may think are not for you, but you're actually doing a test, like an A/B split test, right? And if you're doing an A/B split test, you want to maybe try out a little bit of new content, might be different than what you're normally used to doing. At least then it doesn't get blocked from the normal algorithm that's looking at your standard normal behavior. So I think that that would be a real game changer for content creators and those that are doing like education courses, whether like I do yoga and I do crypto, right? But if I do something on Instagram, it's now just, that's why you kind of have to have separate accounts, right? But I think by doing this, it enables the person to have different personas. And I would be interested to see if maybe they would be considering allowing Instagram have one account for different
Oh yeah, no,
personas.
I
That'd
think
be
that's a
interesting.
safe bet, and it's a good point. Where Twitter was the first to announce that this was coming, after seeing it, I think we all agree that's clearly the future, which is there's something big cooking up in social media land. There's a few huge things cooking up in social media land. One of them is, as Twitter showed us, they're now changing Twitter so that you, as one user, have one email address and one password. You have one account, actually. Because what's happening right now is people are making separate accounts. And that's going to become problematic when they start forcing you to do identity verification on your accounts. So what they want to do is, and what they're going to do, is have different personas for your account. And one persona is, you like to collect butterflies, and you have another person, and it's all about, I'm crazy about butterflies, and it's all all your content about butterflies, and people follow that persona like an account, what used to be an account, but it's now called a persona. And your single account has many personas, and those personas each have their own individual followers. And And that's kind of a future look as to how these social apps will likely organize themselves. And so the next big story, number 3, is from the Washington Post. Top U.S. Catholic Church official resigns. Why did he resign? It's a trick question. It's about data. After the Catholic media site obtained his alleged Grindr app and phone location data from an undisclosed data broker. And the answer, it's always a trick question. The answer is always data.
Oh my.
This is in
Oh,
regard to Pegasus, isn't it?
oh my.
That was the first thing that came to mind when I saw that too.
The
That's
top
deep.
administrator of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops resigns after a Catholic media site told the conference it had access. We got to open this up. Washington Post. Oh, you roadblocked it, you jerkies. They tracked
Tyler,
him
you
on
know it's
Grindr and 2 gay bars.
These guys are a bit like the monks, though, Tyler. You remember
Oh,
you
and
were talking
yeah,
about the monks?
yeah,
Like half the
I know
people
what
in
you
the
mean.
Catholic half the people in the Catholic Church don't
Yeah.
even believe in God.
So, interesting use case of data in this one, isn't it? Outing gay people through app trackers is a nightmare scenario for surveillance capitalism, and that's an interesting point. Which is there's doxing, and then there's doxing gay people and outing gay people using data, and that is many people use that as the worst case scenario in their argument about data privacy is outing of people who, but in this case, normally they're referring to outing gay people who are not priests. They're talking about just regular people who understand.
Yeah, normally they're doing this naughty thing that God wouldn't approve of what I call a hierarchy of sins, i.e., if I'm a homosexual person, then someone in the Catholic Church would say my sin of homosexuality is way worse than his sin of arrogance, which I don't think God smiles on. He just goes, eh.
Yeah, so I think if I read the article, I skimmed it yesterday or maybe it was earlier today. The Vatican had its own sort of source of spyware that was tracking its own priests in terms of who was using dating apps, specifically gay dating apps, and they themselves were hacked within this entire thing that's been
Yeah,
going on
but in
since
that
Sunday.
case, the Vatican, by the
Yeah.
way, that would be very brilliant of the Vatican to do that so that they could avoid embarrassing headlines like this, so that they could preemptively go in and say, hey, you know what? You got to hit the road, Jack, because we see you're on Grindr or whatever, and no press would ever be the wise part. Like no one would ever know. Yes.
Tyler. Tyler, this is just a very well, it's close to it's close to me a little bit with my brother who is gay. This is a very interesting dynamic because what Tina said could be truly possible, and what you just said could be truly possible because the Catholic Church has had drama around this for a very, very long time. And it's unfortunate, but if you look at Grid in the late 80s, early 90s, that was in essence what was happening. One of my priests in the parish that we went to school, he was molesting altar boys, and that came out after he died. So at the end of the day, there has to be, from the alternative non-binary community, there has to be some way for the Catholic Church to possibly mitigate that. But I think that Tina's observation, if that is in fact correct, would be a way for them to mitigate problems ahead of time. But then at some point too, let's just be realistic, there's such tarnishedness inside the Catholic Church right now around gays and lesbians that it's just, yeah, I'm not surprised here. This is not like a super big headline for me because I am in that alternative community because of the people that I engage with and the systems I've worked with and the people that have been related to my family and friends and the industry I worked in for many years. So I would probably say that to me, this doesn't sound like a big deal other than now the Catholic Church has got to start backpedaling yet again on how to solve this problem, but it's a bigger problem
I'm
because it's still
surprised.
happening.
Yep, I'm
And it's a
surprised they
shame
made
to
it
say,
public though, because I'm looking at more of the details in this case,
correct.
and it was a Catholic news blog called The Pillar, which is on Substack, that got Grindr location data and used it to out a very senior priest. He's now resigned, and the question is how. It's now also been reported that Grindr sells its location data, which that's truly mind blowing. Um, as part of how they monetize, I guess. And as the headline originally said, it came through a data broker. So kind of one layer of plausible deniability. But the EFF is looking into precisely how Grindr sells its data, and they've talked about it in an article that I'm tweeting out right now, so you can get a better sense of how Grindr is selling its data, and all about the Pillar, who what the Pillar being a Catholic publication, why wouldn't they just keep it in house, so to speak, and avoid the Church of the Embarrassment? It's kind of, unless they really want the clicks, I guess. It's wild. Anywho.
Well, what they should want, Tyler, is they should want the souls, i.e., not just this one story. They should be showing love to the whole population and getting away from the historical bad stuff and getting back to the Bible.
Well,
in my
if
opinion,
they really want a clean shop, they could announce, "Hey, all your phones are hacked. If you did anything bad, you might want to resign today." That would clean shop real quickly. You've got 1 week to resign before we, after 1 week, if you've not resigned, we're going to start calling you out. But you have 1 week of amnesty to resign. That then all of a sudden, the rats would run from the ship. So that would be one way to do it. Anyway, next headline. We did the top 3. Number 4, phone numbers belonging to 10 prime ministers, 3 presidents, and a king were among the list of the 50,000 NSO Pegasus targets leaked to Amnesty International. As I said, we're now going to start seeing the names come out, as many people are trying to cross-reference whose phone numbers these are in this database of 50,000 numbers. And now the Washington Post says 10 prime ministers. Ouch. Ouch. Ouch.
hopefully the
Oh
Grinder
my
data isn't
goodness.
on there.
Dead man switch, Tyler. I'm still convinced this is part of it.
10 prime ministers and 3 presidents and a king.
Tyler,
Oh,
Charles is in the
fantastic.
room. Charles
Fantastic.
Johnson.
Charles, jump up on stage, would you? Where is he? Where's Charles?
Raise
Get
your
your
hand,
hands up.
Charles.
Get your
Hands
hands
up
up.
in the
There he is.
air.
We're in for a treat, everybody. Welcome back, Charles Johnson, who stunned the crowd yesterday. And here we are, day 2 of Pegasus Gate. And Charles, just for the record, was likely one of the first Americans to be hit with Pegasus. And he was, just to catch everyone up who didn't join us yesterday, just a real fast summary. Charles is one of the first Americans to be hit with Pegasus years ago, because he had built a startup with a really important technology that was very directly competitive with Israel's other very important information collecting tool, which is facial recognition. And because he was competing with Israel's facial recognition tool, they used Pegasus against him as the co-founder of America's facial recognition platform called Clearview AI. And so he obviously got in touch with the NSA and the CIA and the FBI when they wanted to learn everything they could about this Pegasus thing and who else they were targeting. And so Charles has his own list, separate from the 50,000, and he gave us all kinds of interesting insights and has lots of interesting predictions that he's not able to share publicly in this room, although he has sent to me via DMs, which I will not share under any circumstances. And the headline today: 10 prime ministers, 3 presidents, and a king are being named now as part of this. Welcome back, Charles. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just give me 1 sec.
Okay,
Talk amongst
another
yourselves. Just 1 sec.
related headline before we reveal the names of those prime ministers and presidents and the king. Pakistan probes whether their prime minister Khan phone was hacked, and of course they are doing that. Every country right now is trying to figure out who in their country was hacked, starting with the prime minister, and then the king if they have one, and then the president, and then working their way down the hierarchy pyramid. Monica, what's going on in India with Pegasus? We had heard that there was many of Modi's political opponents had Pegasus, and now we saw a headline in our last meeting that they are now calling it treason, that they're now suggesting Modi has committed treason in doing this. Vinay? Monica, there you are. Hey, Monica.
Yes, Tyler, it seems to be a big issue, and I've been seeing both sides. The funniest part about this is, and I say funny because the new minister who had been sworn in is actually on the list, and he belongs to the IT ministry. So I'm not really sure how this list has come around, but yes, there is a lot of outrage. The questions that are getting asked is why the amount of money that is being spent was actually spent, and why the snooping was needed. So the opposition is going hammer and tongs after the government, not only against the snooping incident but also about the kind of information that may have been revealed, and why some certain individuals who belong to the detractor section of the current government and the prime minister have been included. However, I haven't actually seen anything credible coming from the other side which states why this has happened, or there has been a detraction saying that this is not something that the government actually agrees with, and this is part of the procedure. There was a discussion in the parliament where a small address was also given, but this was just to defend. But I haven't seen anything more credible from the other side, so not sure what's going on and how the government will be able to defend themselves.
Macron in Paris, among 14 heads of states, among spyware targets, French President Emmanuel Macron leads a list of 14 current and former heads of states who may have been targeted for hacking by clients of the notorious Israeli spyware NSO firm. Amnesty International said Tuesday the unprecedented revelation should send a chill down the spine of world leaders. Amnesty's Secretary General said in a statement, among potential targets found a list of 50,000 numbers leaked to Amnesty, and the Paris-based journalism nonprofit Forbidden Stories include Presidents Imran Khan of Pakistan, Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa. Yeah.
By the way, so just so you know, what will come out. So I was told today President Biden was briefed that he was one of the people who was hacked in 2017. Just so you know, right before he was in Ukraine. His sort of
And
last.
Tyler, I just dug up an art. I'm sorry to speak over you, Charles.
And
Tyler, I just dug up an article from McAfee saying 2017.
What about McAfee?
Oh, Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry, Charles. So I just, I'm going down the whole. So Charles, my theory is that this is somehow related to McAfee's so-called dead man switch. So I googled McAfee and Pegasus, and a 2017 article pops up. So I'm going to send that to Tyler.
Yeah, well, McAfee always had connections with the Russians going way back. And if you look at some of his final tweets, there were discussions about his involvement with the Russians. I believe there was some articles that came out recently about McAfee's dealings with them, where he would own these homes for them and buy all these strange homes around the world. And it was, that was sort of my understanding when it came to McAfee. And he, So, but worth looking into further. I was going to say though,
on the topic of McAfee, he did say, if I get killed, a data dump will occur, outing lots of very powerful people. Something to that effect. If somebody can find that comment that he made, or if it was a tweet or whatever it was, in the days before he died, that would let's find that, because what an amazing coincidence that maybe this 50,000 list, maybe he had that 50,000 list and he gave it to this. Maybe that's the source that got it into the hands where it is now. Perhaps, Charles.
So Ty, I just tweeted you a 2017 article that either the company or he penned, talking about iOS users aren't so immune after all. So this is a good 4 years ahead of its time, and really lines up with what Charles is saying about Biden.
See if you can find his comment about if I disappear, I have a.
Oh yeah, he used that. That's the whole whacked
thing. Yeah, if I get whacked, there's going to be a data dump that happens automatically if I'm not alive to stop it, which will out a whole bunch of people. It'll be the biggest expose ever, which this could fit that bill. So let's see if there's a plausible connection there anyway, because maybe this list of 50,000, he had something to do with in getting it into the hands where it is now. Go ahead, Charles.
All right. So I was told that that yesterday President Biden was briefed that he himself was hacked by Pegasus while he was on his final trip of his of his vice presidency. So right before President Donald Trump took office in January 2017, that was when that then Vice President Biden, now President Biden, was hacked by Pegasus. And I was told he was told this today around noon in DC. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know the how it was told to him, but I was told this by somebody who was one of his major donors. So make
And
of that
so
what you will.
he, in a major fundraising event with some of his big donors, said, "Yeah, you know what? I found out I got hacked back in Ukraine in 2017, something like that."
Yeah, it was relayed. So it comes through the chief of staff to this donor, and that's sort of how I learned of it. But it's very interesting. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, there's all sorts of there's been all sorts of fighting over Ukraine, cyber warfare and the whole bit going on many years now, and it would make sense that in a place like Ukraine you'd be able to show off your wares. And of course the Israelis have a lot of relationships in Ukraine, as do the Russians. And of course there was a kind of breakdown between the Israelis and the Russians after Trump got elected. And so it all kind of makes sense
So
in that
this
context.
article that Chris just found is titled, "iOS users are not so immune to threats after all." It's from early 2017, February of 2017, from McAfee, and it says, one of the biggest iPhone viruses in iOS devices is Pegasus. And so they've clearly known about it from early 2017, and that's given them a lot of time to try and learn a lot about it, because it's cracking iPhones in a way that iOS is not able to stop and hasn't been able to stop since at least February 2017. So no doubt Apple has known about it for about 5 years. McAfee's known about it for 5 years. They've been able to do anything about it for 5 years. So
Yeah, I think this is going to reveal a lot of things about the nature of who has been funding the Israeli cyber operations. And if you're an American on this on this call, or you're if you have money in a pension fund in America, the odds are pretty good that you are one such person that's been funding it, or if you're a Briton for that matter. So it's very interesting. I'm preparing a report on the NSO stuff. I heard again from law enforcement about NSO. Apparently, I was one of the first Americans to file a report on them. And so it's certainly something that's catching the attention of federal law enforcement. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it shakes out. And of course, we have Tom Barrack, was arrested today, acting as a spy for UAE. And Barrack is very friendly with Jared Kushner. UAE is, of course, very aligned with Israel, or with the former government of Israel, with Netanyahu. And so it looks like there's actually a concerted effort to roll back a lot of these technologies.
and so by
He wasn't arrested for being a spy, by the way. He was arrested for being an unregistered lobbyist and
No,
lying about
it's the same thing. Actually, no, that's not quite right. He was arrested under the same guise that Marina Butina was, the same section of law. There's also a FARA violation there, but the main charge against him is the Marina Butina charge that was used to deport that young woman who was basically canvassing the American right in the
so
U.S.
there's
I've actually met
To
Mr. Barrack, by the way, and I've met him several times in the Trump Hotel. He's quite gentlemanly. He's somebody you would think of as a grandfather type, and the allegations against him are quite serious, and it's a direct through line to Jared Kushner and also to Paul Manafort. who had all sorts of weird, Russian connections. And you'll recall at one point, Michael Wolff, who is sometimes to believe, sometimes not to be believed. He has his own kind of strange connections, particularly with the Russians. But the writer Michael Wolff mentioned that there were sort of three bad people out there: Tom Barrack, Jeffrey Epstein, and Donald Trump. And he wrote this many years before Trump ascended to the presidency. And of course, Epstein's dead, and Barrack's in federal custody. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out.
So one other detail in this is that with Pegasus on your phone, they're able to see messages that you don't even send as you type them, which I think a lot of people say what they really feel before they actually hit the send button, and that information is discernible from Pegasus. So they see what you really were thinking before your deleted unsent messages, which are likely more valuable than the ones you do send in many cases. So
only one step away from
yeah,
reading your
that's
thoughts, Tyler.
precisely the point.
Only
Yep.
one step away.
Yeah, go ahead, Messi.
And yeah, and for me is who are you gonna trust with who, and who do you do business with what? Here in Ethiopia, a few years back, the Chinese, for free actually, did build the African Union building, and then of course about 2-3 years ago or something like that, they found out that they bugged in the whole thing and they were listening to the AU meetings. And imagine that 54 countries, whatever they were discussing, the data was being transferred to China. And of course, they vehemently denied that, but everybody knew that was happening and that all African countries, including, AU, trying to mediate the Egyptian and Ethiopian water disputes and other things. But how do you do business anymore? I mean, who do you trust and things like that? So to me, it's like the bigger question now is, I don't know, how do they do business with each other if we are being spied by everyone, and now,
Yep.
including
So
private
a couple of
citizens.
additional points and additional headlines from other outlets, like Washington Post and whatnot, that the NSO, the CEO behind Pegasus, claims that this leak of 50,000 phone numbers has nothing to do with us, and had first heard about the list last month, he says, and that they are ending the ability for Pegasus to work in countries that have human rights issues, which is an interesting comment, I guess.
Yeah, they've claimed this. This has been the fourth time they've claimed that they're not going to allow people to use this technology in human rights violating areas. Color me suspicious that's not
Yeah,
going to happen.
and then there's an actual interview with the CEO named NSO CEO named Shalev Julio, and Shalev Julio has done an interview, and I will tweet out the link to the interview. Although it's not, what's the date on it? I don't think it's new. No, it is new. He's talking now. Yeah, this is
The
a
other
new
thing,
interview that he just did.
yeah, the other thing people are going to learn in relatively short order is that Francisco Partners, which is a U.S. private equity fund, they actually owned NSO for a spell. And I'm quoting from an article that I was sent today about Michael Flynn's relationship with Francisco Partners and NSO Group. But this is the direct quote. Flynn also worked as a consultant last year for Francisco Partners, a U.S.-based private equity firm that owns NSO Group, but he did not disclose how much he was paid. At least two Francisco partner executives have sat on OSY's board. OSY is it's NSO Luxembourg. The company was actually set up in Luxembourg and Cyprus as well as in Israel. And so there'll be other sort of these smaller sort of shells that were set up that people will discover as the sort of story winds through. But it's going to be a very, very, very exciting time. And one of the things that we've learned as well is that Blackstone also tried to buy NSO at one point. And Blackstone, of course, is tied in with Steve Schwartzman, who was a big supporter of the former president. And Blackstone, has been involved in all kinds of shady things over the years, including buying and collecting DNA-related companies, which is particularly interesting given Schwartzman's connections in China. I believe there's a scholarship named after him, in China, and he gave something like $100 million personal gift to Tsinghua University. So it's quite interesting to see all of these connections kind of laid bare, and I think the NSO piece was very much a missing link on a
Yeah,
lot of
some
these
of the
issues.
big names that are now being revealed are the South African president, which, by the way, South Africa is in complete turmoil at the moment, as we've been seeing reports. If you're not up to date on that, South Africa is turning into some are calling it apocalyptic like scenario at the moment. Hold that thought, because also I'm only going to read 10 names. So keep in mind, number one, South African president whose country is now in utter turmoil. Hold that thought. Emmanuel Macron from France, Tedros, the head of the WHO, and then the prime minister of Lebanon, who just resigned this week, which is also, wow, what a wild coincidence, one of the other countries on the planet that is in complete apocalyptic despair at the moment. Interesting coincidence. There's only a few countries at the moment that are in complete, utter chaos. South Africa and Lebanon being two of them. I'm trying to think of any others that are equal in that regard at the moment. Not another one does, huh?
Myanmar.
Tyler, there is
Myanmar.
Myanmar
Afghanistan.
could be close, but so you're right. Yeah, we can put Myanmar there. But that's really interesting that out of the 10 that have been revealed so far, already it's two of the countries that are in complete disarray. And then other names is the president of the European Council, the King of Monaco, Monaco's prime minister, the prime minister of Pakistan, um, and Felipe Calderon, the former president of Mexico, and Robert Maley, a longtime American diplomat who was the chief negotiator in the U.S.-Iran deal. And obviously, Israel has an incredible, intense, existential threat level interest in anything happening with the U.S.-Iran deal. And no doubt they have a lot of interest in the prime minister of Pakistan. And indeed, they will have an incredible interest in what's happening on their northern border with Lebanon, which is now in complete apocalyptic fallout. So this is really interesting stuff. Yeah.
So Tyler, Lebanon, I think, is more because of Iranian and Hezbollah ties, and then the other one would be Palestine. That would be in complete disarray, and the Muslim Brotherhood, which, from what I read, I can't remember which article it was, but one of the Pegasus findings was uh, some of the hacking was some of the Pegasus
You're right.
hacking
For us,
of
there's a
one of the
headline coming up, which is that two
yeah.
Palestinian intelligence officers have now been killed yesterday. And no doubt their devices will need to be inspected to see if they were hacked as well. Hard to imagine, though, that Israel wouldn't be using this in its fullest capabilities in Palestine and in Gaza. So it's going to be very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, and for those who are unaware, Israel has a long history of using and building technologies first that they deploy on the Arab population, particularly the Palestinian population. Any Vision, of course, which is their facial recognition, their far inferior product to Clearview, was set up with the Palestinians first in mind. You'll also note that I think this is interesting, that Ben and Jerry's
Correct.
broke their
Yesterday.
silence, right? They yes, which is of course very interesting, given the ties of Ben and Jerry's, in America, and its sort of progressive streak. It's no longer selling in the occupied territories. I was also informed yesterday that there are a number of American students who are part of Students for Justice in Palestine that have also been compromised by the NSO product, which has not yet, I don't think, made the news. But I think the Washington Post is working on a story on that.
Yeah, Charles, that's the free Sheikh Jarrah movement in the United States, particularly on the West Coast, I believe, that you're referring to. There's a number of students that got up on the West Coast side of the United States and that started a movement called Free Sheikh Jarrah, and there's a number of them that there's been a lot of reporting around being compromised because they were running events back home in Palestine as well.
Okay. Now we've gotten through 1, 2, 3, 4 big articles, and another touch point in this
What,
conversation.
what
One
do you
second, is that
the,
Apple and Google can do more to screw up the economics of NSO style mass exploitation and should be pressured to do so. Let me read what that's about. And there was a headline yesterday that Amazon is kicking out anybody that has anything to do with Pegasus. But this blog, coming from a security individual, a cryptographer and professor at Johns Hopkins University, says a case against security nihilism. We should all want perfect security. And the kind of subheadline of it is that Apple and Google can do more to screw up the economics of NSO and should be pressured to do so. No, yeah.
Sorry, I
Yeah, I
think
think
someone
Charles
was
was
saying.
trying to jump in.
ask? What do you think the consequences should
Right.
be here? It's sort of an interesting question, right? I mean, American taxpayers, fund directly, some several $billions to the Israelis year after year, which may have made more sense when they were a poorer nation, but now they're quite a wealthy nation, or at least relatively wealthy. What do you think the consequences will be, in the U.S. context? I still have not seen an American politician sound off on the
That's a
scandal,
great point.
unless
Great
you have.
point. There's now been ample time for anyone in politics to make a statement, and a remarkable silence, which will only become more obvious, with each passing hour as they refuse to even comment on it. It's truly wild. Macron, like all of the names that I just mentioned being hacked, like for not a single U.S. politician to make a single tweet about it, or is truly remarkable.
And Tyler, do you think that's because they're all in kind of war room zone,
Oh, for
i.e., they're
sure.
all locked in rooms trying to work out, but then waiting for the Biden precise thing to then dictate the mood music of the rest? I don't know.
It takes time to shake this one out.
I suspect the first person to weigh in on it will be AOC. Just call it informed speculation.
So, Verizon joins 18. All the other stories are absolutely banal by comparison, honestly, except perhaps this one, that Biden nominates Jonathan Cantor, a longtime foe of Google, to become the Department of Justice antitrust chief. Oh, and I'm sure, oops, Google's not so happy about that appointment. Cantor has represented Microsoft, Yelp in anti-Google push. Biden's appointment signal aggressive antitrust agenda. President Joe Biden plans to nominate Jonathan Cantor as head of Department of Justice antitrust.
It's much different from Macon Delrahim, who actually worked for Google, who was the head of antitrust under Trump. So quite a departure, I would say.
They must be wondering now, these big tech companies, why they didn't fund Donald Trump, and why did they fund Joe Biden so heavily in this last election.
Well, I think there's a big mistake though in seeing the tech companies, Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, Microsoft, as being a monolith. It seems to me Amazon continues to win a number of government contracts and is well regarded, Bezos in particular, well regarded by the sort of U.S. deep state. Facebook seems like it's in serious trouble after losing that lawsuit over CDA 230 in Texas, and its ability to project, bad things on its platform. All these books that are coming out about Facebook and how how Zuckerberg and others seem to care more about the company than the country that they're in. Microsoft, of course, has all of its contracts reviewed and removed, given its security, concerns. And so it's not clear to me that it's clear to me that there'll be some serious winners and losers of the Biden presidency, and that we won't we won't be wasting much time in figuring out who the winners are and who the losers
So
will
I'm
be.
tweeting out all of the articles we discuss in real time to the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW. And we've got just a few more of the big articles that all of your coworkers are sharing with each other before we get into the actually much more interesting um, links.
Can I
Yes,
ask
go ahead for
you a
us.
question? Does anyone have any idea how much big tech contributes to the total annual GDP of the United States?
On a
Ballpark
GDP
percent?
basis,
Yeah.
I heard something like 30%
what
So
last year, but that's just a speculative number. I haven't confirmed it.
let's assume even 15%, right? I mean, Charles, Tyler, regardless of the theses that we come up with, what are the chances that the United States is actually going to let all this happen to big tech in the United States? I mean, that's like in 2001 with one particular kingdom that I won't name, which was rumored to have circa around 7% GDP of the United States. To date, what happened to that kingdom, right? Charles, I'm sure you know what I'm referring to.
I do indeed. I do indeed. Yeah,
Nothing happened.
it's how would I put this? My view is that the antitrust rules are used in the U.S. as the stick to persuade, shall we say, the American tech companies to behave themselves or to change what they're doing. And so, in the case of Microsoft's antitrust, issues that it confronted, there were lots of sweeping changes within Microsoft during that period. And I think the same thing will be used here. I think there'll be some CEOs and others that are made an example of, personally. But I think that that's really what's going on here. It has less to do with the economic structure, dangerous though it is. I mean, one could think of a situation like, let's say you compromise Mark Zuckerberg, right? Hypothetically, of course, speaking, and then he goes and buys a number of companies, say, and he alone can decide whether or not to buy those companies. And so, if you're a foreign intelligence, actors, say the Russians, and you persuade Zuckerberg after he's met with Yuri Milner, who's invested in Facebook during the
quite
2007
heavily.
2008 period, you could get coincidentally, you could get him to go and invest in certain certain companies, and then you could wash your money that way. And I think there are a number of Silicon Valley people that have been sort of propped up in that way, where they're sort of mascots, sort of unwitting figures who have their companies acquired by
Big tech.
by these
Yeah.
larger companies, big tech. And I think that that's the real issue: is how can you do real security reviews? And I think we'll start to see more counterintelligence on the part of these major tech companies, and those that aren't doing careful audits of those who work there or who come into their network. They will see themselves fall by the wayside
Well,
during the
it's
Biden years.
super interesting point because the big tech companies do a lot of acquisitions, especially Google. And if you can invest in a quote unquote startup who's likely to potentially get acquired by Google, and you have good relationships with the M&A team at Google, of which I have a few, if you can whisper in the ear of the M&A team to about acquire, and I, by the way, I've invested in very few startups. Let me just reveal something very relevant here. I have not done a ton of angel investments. I'm incredibly risk adverse as an investor. I do well on the traditional stock market, as Faraz knows, and that's why I don't feel the need to do a high risk speculative investments in startups, even though I'm very friendly with lots of folks in that space. But I do investments in startups when I know the potential acquirer who is looking for a startup like that, and then I actually speak to both sides. I speak to the M&A team at the acquirer, and I say, "Hey, do you think you would acquire a startup like this?" And if they say, "Yeah, that would be a super hot target for us under the following conditions," okay, great, thank you. And I go back to the startup and say, "Hey, I'm willing to invest in you, and I'm actually going to help you get acquired in the next few months. Is that of interest to you? If it is, I'll invest." And it's just flipping a startup. Some startups get built to go the long distance and become the next, Amazon. Some are built to just make a quick 10 million bucks, 20, 30 million bucks. That's plenty good for us. We put in a year and a half, 2.5 years. We made a quick 10 million, not bad, right? So that's how I've done this multiple times now with the few startups I've invested in, is I've helped them get acquired because I knew the M&A lead at the company who was going to acquire them, and the founders were cool with it, and it worked out. And in multiple cases, it's worked out. Now, why couldn't Yuri Milner? Really shouldn't name names. At governments, there are people who want to do money laundering, and you could do this on a similar type of approach of investing a few million bucks into a startup who then gets acquired, and now you have clean money in the form of stock. And maybe even if it was a stock, even if they bought the startup for stock. And by the way, there still is a massive acquisition spree in terms of what we call acqui-hires, where you acquire the company just for the talent, and you can put together a team of 10 engineers. Apple is stated internally, they'll pay on a startup. They don't even negotiate anymore on the value of the startup. It's just $3 million per engineer. That's just the blanket value of the startup in their calculation for their M&A team. So if you get 10 startups together, that's 30 million bucks. It doesn't really matter what your product is. They're just acquiring you for the talent. So that could be a way to, put some money into that company, get it going, and then you can help, get it acquired, and then you're money laundering essentially. So anyway, it's
Tyler, on the acquihire thing, I joined Anderson Consulting when there was 56,000 people globally, right? The stock price when we floated, $12. What's the head count today? Over 500,000. What's the stock price? $312 a share. So what? I just think it's a great example of your acquihire thing. Just getting more people.
Those people have value. But the bigger point that Charles made is that Yuri Milner happens to have a really powerful position inside of Facebook, and no doubt have strong ties in Google. And I bet he has strong ties in the M&A department at Google. So
I would also say that, hypothetically speaking, if you were a young man who started a virtual reality startup with, say, a Russian co-founder, and that company were to be acquired by Facebook, and then you would go on and start another company, that might be quite interesting.
Which may or may not
just
be
something
around
to think about.
security.
Yes, and that company might start struggling in the near future. Just thought, something to think about. I guess we'll see.
If you're paying close attention and you are able to connect the dots, Charles just made a humdinger of a prediction without making any prediction at all. So totally off the record. Maybe tomorrow I'll make a related prediction so that Charles can recuse himself. So yeah.
Can I just make a final point on that, Tyler? So, for the wider audience, who tends to go and take small bets on the stock market, and this is just my view, and maybe I'll let Tyler make his own view. The stock market and the global capital markets, I played in them for a very long time, and so have other people. They're broken. They're rigged. The only way that you can make money in them is by critical thinking, thesis building, such as the way that people do in this room, plus mosaic theory, and then taking bets. Or don't participate in them and invest in startups where you can have access to asymmetrical information the way that we do in this room. That's it.
Yeah, but you can have asymmetrical information in public companies. I mean,
you can also get lucky too.
Tyler.
Like, I think we need to be honest about this. There's a lot of things that I that I've gotten into where I've just been absurd. I mean, fortune favors the bold. I certainly didn't know that certain companies I would invest in, around sequencing food, for instance, would be super useful because of a global pandemic, right? I mean, there are all sorts of things where you have to play to win the lottery, right? And I won't say that startups are quite a lottery, but sometimes it certainly feels that way. Though it does seem that there are a lot of rigged games here and there. I personally just try to invest in the things I know, or things where I can, as Faraz says, have an asymmetric advantage. And I also find just the day to day, watching the stocks go up and down of publicly traded companies, I find that to be a extremely stress
It
inducing
is.
endeavor. So I only invest in things that are not publicly traded, because that way I cannot go crazy just watching the
Yeah.
stocks go up and
You
down.
really got to ignore the market generally. But people do go crazy. And by the way, there's that speaks to Robinhood, which is just about to IPO. And indeed, that is driving a lot of people crazy. And strangely, Robinhood has it intentionally designed itself as a sort of video game. And they've even had to remove some of the video game like elements due to criticism for being like an addicted video game. But it's interesting in that day trading is itself sort of an interesting video game. And maybe in a weird way, by emphasizing the video game like characteristics of the trading platform, in this case, Robinhood, all the traditional trading platforms like interactive brokers and whatnot were incredibly Windows 95 ish. And in comes Robinhood, which feels more like Candy Crush. And it's not a surprise that young people are flocking into Robinhood. And they're treating it like it's a video game, based on dollars. And many people losing lots of money. And there was unfortunately a suicide and whatnot. But they're being forced to remove some of the animations and confetti, behaviors that make it feel very Candy Crush like. And but in a weird way, maybe it should feel like a video game so that you realize
Absolutely not. Absolutely not, because there's
yeah,
no respawning.
I'm
They should not allow this sort of thing. I mean, it's allowing people's psychology to get hacked by these arcade like things or casino like effects. That's not what the stock
true.
market was for. I mean, it may have become that, but the stock market is supposed to be a way in which everyone can participate and actually owning the means of production. I mean, not to sound like a Marxist, but if you have diffuse stock ownership, then you can have real wealth creation across our society. And when you turn the whole thing into meme stocks and all that sort of thing, you get in real trouble real fast. I mean, I had an opportunity to invest in Robinhood. I know, Tyler and I know some of the same people who are in it. I thought it was a very bad idea. I still think it was a very bad idea. And I think that we'll see over time just how true that was borne out. And of course, I'm certain a lot of the people who are involved will make a lot of money, but that that's just not how I want to go down as the guy who, it's like the people who addicted people to Juul, for instance, right? You want to go down in history as the guy who addicted a whole new generation of people to nicotine? No, thank you.
Charles,
Hey,
LS, do you see it as more as high frequency trading, like back in the '80s and so forth? And I know you're younger than me,
Yeah,
but
and I think that was dangerous too. I mean, to be honest, I think there's a lot of things where the instantaneous feedback of information is not necessarily a good thing for people. We are primates who are pattern seekers who spaz out on various things, and there are all kinds of pump and dump issues that we're starting to see, with the crypto world and elsewhere. And I think it's a real problem. And I myself have been prone to it. I'm a fairly intelligent person, so like therefore by the grace of God go I. But I myself have found the ups and downs of these kind of things to have a physiological effect on me, and I think that when people are gambling, and these accounts like Robinhood are targeted to millennials who already don't have much wealth, I think there's a real problem there, and we need to be just sort of mindful of that. And of course,
Charles.
not even talking about all the scandals that Robinhood's had associated with it, which are considerable. Blocking trading at different times, selling all sorts of data, to all kinds of different parties. Um, it's not necessarily the the kind of thing I want to be associated with, and I think it's quite dangerous. I mean, and there's a reason they're being fined, all over the place.
So
Charles,
no real long-term growth. I'm sorry, Faraz, just to finish. So no real long-term economic growth, just eight-card Molly, financial engineering in a sense. But then the economy doesn't grow, for middle class, lower class, et cetera, no matter what country you're in. You're just basically trading and getting some acquisition, and one side of the population loses while another one gains.
Hey, I've been in the stock market for 30 years, most of it professionally. I've been an analyst, buy side, sell side,
leave you
hedge fund
guys to it.
manager. So
I
no,
just
no,
want to
no,
say
I
one
don't.
second,
Go ahead.
and then I'll
Go
leave you
ahead.
guys
Go ahead,
to it,
Faraz.
right?
Go
So
ahead.
in terms of day trading, listen, certain individuals have the ability to do it. For example, by putting news together and by synthetically analyzing it. Just for example, and I won't say that Tyler has the ability or Charles has the ability or I have the ability, but I've seen it in certain instances happening in this room where individuals would have the ability to do it. But in the long run, you're always going to lose it to the HFTs by the amount of speed that they have to conduct a trade and front run you. And in certain instances, that's not good. In the long term, it is never, ever good. But certain individuals do have the ability. However, the way that it would be a good idea to play the stock market is, for example, on information building, on thesis building, such as the way of, how we've been looking at social commerce and things along those lines, and taking long-term trades on Twitter and the likes of those stocks. Now, I'm not recommending any of this, but I'm just saying that would be a good trade. However, the best way that, for example, an individual like myself would do it, or I would imagine others in this room, such as the people that I'm very good friends with, would do it, is probably take positions in startups that we would have have a view on in from the perspective of getting acquired by some of the larger companies. And that's the way I personally do it. I'll leave it at that, and I'll let the discussion continue. Thank you very much.
Another
Hey,
way to
Tyler.
have an unfair
I
advantage.
do
Go ahead.
this. Dan, can you mind?
Yeah, Ken
Because
was
I
waiting.
was
Go ahead,
like,
Ken.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks. First of all, I agree completely with what Faraz said about day trading. Okay, so I don't even have any dispute about that. I agree with most of what Charles said about some of the dangers of Robinhood. What I would say, just on to be a devil's advocate on Robinhood, because I've been in a lot of rooms where there's been debates on Robinhood, there is a school of thought. It's not my thought, but there are people out there, particularly a lot of young people, who view this from like a libertarian perspective. They don't want protection. They just want to be able to do whatever they want. I mean, one of the things I made a point when I started off in the business, okay, which is, again, 30 something years ago, um, a 19-year-old with no investment experience would never be allowed to open an options account. That's the kid who killed suicide, who killed himself. I mean, so I just don't think that we should stretch freedom to that point that happens. But there's other people who disagree with me on that. So, but I did want to make a point because I think it was Faraz. There's an earlier point you made about the system being rigged, and I'm not saying the system's completely fair, but I will tell you this: there is more transparency in the U.S. markets today than there was when I started. I mean, when I started, you just couldn't get like an annual report online because we didn't have the internet, and so being able to like get an annual report like really fast, if you were like wanting to make a quick investment decision, required a lot of money. There were services you can get from the SEC, but only professionals had it. Only professionals had access to some of the more complex market making on Nasdaq, and now you can, if you have an account for any brokerage firm, Schwab, Fidelity, whatever, you get all of that stuff. The amount of information available to retail investors today is exponentially. I mean, literally exponentially greater than it was when I started. So it is a much fairer, more transparent, maybe not perfect, but a lot better than it was 30 years ago. You want to talk about rigged? NASDAQ spreads used to be rigged, okay? There was no decimal pricing. I remember I went in to buy Microsoft. I was very young. It was like my first year in the business. And I remember it to this day. It was 25 by 25 and a half. And I tell my trader, I want to bid 25 and a quarter. And he tells me, you can't do that. I said, why can't I do that? He said, you can't do that because you'll break the spread and nobody will do business with us. Because all the firms were colluding to create, these bigger spreads. And then two professors wrote a report on it, okay? And all of a sudden, the government cracked down on it. And so now you have, like these little spreads. You could be 25, bid 25 and 20 and offered at 25 and a penny. I mean, that didn't happen, 30 years ago. So it's a lot better than it is, than it was then,
Good point. So I want to jump into the.
So I was going to add that if
ahead,
you
Dan.
want to have an unfair advantage in the marketplace, if we put aside the moral imperative addressing climate change, but you just look at it from a financial point of view, if you believe in it and you understand the basics of it, you have a lot more information than the market is using. I mean, not the market; everyone has access to this information, but the markets generally assume that the world will be similar in the future to what it is in the past, and this is not true anymore. So things like real estate, agriculture, insurance. There's all these markets that I certainly wouldn't day trade on any of this, but if you want to take a 2 to 5 year time frame, you have far more information than the market is currently using to analyze some of these markets. So you can have an unfair advantage if you basically believe in science.
So a few other of the big headlines to blast through. One is that a company called Bolt just raised $333 million at a $4 billion valuation. And Bolt is a very interesting company, and it's not a surprise that they've done this. And I'm regretting not investing in it. And I only didn't because a dear friend of mine was one of their predecessor competitors, and that I'm an advisor to. So I couldn't really invest in it. But Bolt is killing it, and what they do is very elegantly simple. It makes it one click easy to check out anywhere on the internet, with kind of a moving, it roams with you around the internet. It kind of like how Facebook check-in is an easy way to log into a website. Bolt is an easy way to check out of an e-commerce site in one click. So it brings sort of one-click shopping to everybody outside of Amazon, and that's genius. And every shop's going to want that because it reduces shopping cart abandonment and everything else. So it's there. Any startups that make it easy for you to buy stuff really simply is going to do really well right now, because that's the focus of making e-commerce happen inside of Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and everything else. Everybody wants really simple one-click shopping, and especially when we get to VR.
Yeah, I passed on Bolt too. I knew the guy who started it, and I would be up. I was just doing the math right now. I would be up 180 times on my money, which is
yeah.
That's
When we
distressing.
get to that, this is why I focus on the public markets and you focus on the startup. But the point is when we get to VR and AR shopping, that also will be one click checkout essentially, and Bolt might be able to position themselves as the ideal checkout, one click checkout. You might even have blink twice checkout once we get to AR and VR, believe it or not. So Twitter begins rolling out a preview of a revamped Tweetdeck in the US and Canada. Twitter now owns Tweetdeck, and now they've just done a whole new version of it, which they're rolling out to select people, which our friend Jane in Hong Kong, again, as usual, was the source of this new information. And she even tweeted, if you follow Jane on Twitter, she tweeted, because Twitter has said they're only allowing very select people to try out this new version of TweetDeck. And if you go to Jane's Twitter account, she shows you a little code you can insert into your computer, which will reset your cookie to make your browser be one of the magically selected browsers that are able to now download the new version of TweetDeck. So kudos to Jane for finding the clever hack on how to get onto the guest list to try out the new version of TweetDeck. So crypto derivatives exchange called FTX raises $900 million from SoftBank and Sequoia and others, valuing it at $18 billion. They currently handle $10 billion a day in trades on average. Investors include SoftBank, Sequoia, and Third Point, and the cryptocurrency exchange FTX has raised real money. So you will be hearing the words FTX quite a bit. Yes.
Tyler,
Quick
is
I want
that
to
comment.
go on record saying that that company is going to do really, really poorly. Just mark it down.
Uh,
Go ahead, Amit.
Tyler?
quick comment that sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, because I tweeted that, Tyler, does that consider it a unicorn or
Yes,
no?
anything over 1 billion is a unicorn. This is now 18 billion. So it's 18 unicorns, which is what we
Got
call
it. Got it.
10 billion is a decacorn. They're very nearly a double decacorn at this point.
The owner of the founder of FTX came out with a statement saying that buying Goldman is not
Yeah,
out of the
he's
question.
crazy
So
ambitious,
I'll
this
just leave
kid.
it.
Like, yeah.
It
I
smacks
actually
of
met him. I
WeWork.
met him at the.
It does have
I met him
SoftBank
at the
as the
Bitcoin
lead
conference.
investor. So Masa is indeed has a soft spot for wildly ambitious entrepreneurs, and that's the point that Charles is making. Is this
You know, it's interesting if you read the history about SoftBank, and SoftBank will be a company you'll hear a lot about, probably from the U.S. Justice Department, and
and
not too
no
long a
doubt
time
Masa's phone
period.
was hit with
Um,
Pegasus.
I think it's interesting to think about how Sheldon Adelson, of course, used to, did all this business with Massa back in the day, and all the connections that Massa has to, shall we say, organized crime figures, I think in Japan and elsewhere. Might be very interesting to sort of focus on people doing deals with SoftBank and to run from the hills when one sees such a deal these
Charles,
days.
what did you? We had a. Oh, go ahead, Monica.
Uh,
Yes.
Tyler, there is an interesting news about
Okay.
SoftBank from India. This one is that SoftBank has actually Vision Fund 2 and Process, which is Naspers, has invested in Swiggy for a 1.25
Is
billion
that grocery
financing
delivery?
round, and this is really interesting. No, Swiggy is the alternative to Zomato, which is in food tech. And Swiggy, now this is the interesting part. Swiggy is the 25% of its revenue is actually coming from non-food delivery segments, including
That's
grocery
what I said.
delivery,
Grocery delivery.
meat,
Yeah.
and everyday delivery.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very
How
interesting
did
news
I know that?
after the
Yeah.
Zomato IPO.
So the it was SoftBank and Naspers, right? Naspers is huge money, by the way. Like people, they don't get in the news that much, but
Absolutely.
man, they are a powerhouse down there in South Africa. Super smart investors, and they got big pockets. And so them together with SoftBank backing, grocery delivery in India, it tells you all you need to know that we're switching over to a delivery, future of shops because we're switching over to e-commerce and delivery. We're going away from you walking into stores. We're going into you ordering stuff on your phone and having it delivered. And that's why when SoftBank and Naspers, two of the biggest tech funders on the planet, are going into Indian delivery, and it's not just India. We had one yesterday in Colombia that just raised $1 billion at a $5 billion valuation. This is not unique to the West. This is happening globally. So it's the investors are falling over themselves to invest in the e-commerceification of everything. Like Shopify is exploding, although that's publicly traded, and you would be very smart to have been in that as it has now exploded. And Shopify and the likes are making it easy, and it's a really simple premise. Just like everybody got on Facebook, 3 point something billion people, every shop is going to get on e-commerce. It's still today a little bit hard for the cake shop down the street from you to figure out how to become an e-commerce store. That's going to change in the next 12 months. It's going to become just as easy as it was for you to make an Instagram account. It's going to be just as easy to make an Instagram e-commerce account where you can start selling stuff, and the bulk of their sales will now come through their e-commerce and not their actual store. And then they're going to ask themselves, why do I even have this physical store anymore when most of my sales are coming from, the store is not paying for itself necessarily anymore. Let's focus on the e-commerce and let's get a factory on the outside of town. If the net, the business should hopefully grow, and the ones who adopt it first will, have a kind of an advantage. Maria?
Oh,
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think the first element of even building the store is maybe not as difficult these days as it is to be discovered
Correct.
throughout the internet, right? So I think this is the those distribution pipelines, those
Yes.
discovery pipelines, what are the, I think, the even of even bigger
Correct.
value for all of
And
those
now check
stores.
this out, Maria. That's a great point, because it's going to be a battle for the cake shop to figure out, which apps should we use? Should we use Instagram's e-commerce shop, or TikTok, or Snapchat, or this or that, or whatever? And the answer is they're going to go wherever they're going to make the most money for their time. And they're going to make the most money in the places that help them get discovered the most. So the recommendation algorithm that connects the right buyer with the right shop. And TikTok has a remarkably good recommendation engine. And so that's why those apps are investing tremendously into their data scientist teams to build the best recommendation algorithms to enable that to happen, because whoever does that best is going to get all the mom and pops, and that's going to become, it's, $1 million invested today is $1 billion tomorrow if you can build the right recommendation algorithms. It's going to be an interesting race. Google is really in a really good position in this case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean,
Tyler,
there's
Google
that.
has
Oh, sorry, Monica, go ahead.
Tyler, Google in India has via YouTube has just bought Simpson.
Exactly.
So this is going to be
YouTube
interesting.
just bought
So
the social commerce startup called Simsim, a very small $40 million company. Is a social commerce shop. This was announced 24 hours ago, and YouTube just bought a social commerce site, and that tells you Google knows exactly what we're talking about right now. They know the future is this social commerce, which is the mixture of social media and e-commerce. It exploded in China with Pinduoduo. It surpassed Alibaba, which is the size of Amazon, because Amazon is not social media. Facebook and TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat are. And that's where people are spending their time. And when people go to Amazon and they see a product, right, that they're thinking about buying, the data is already shown. They very often, before they buy the product, they go into Instagram and search for that product to see better photos of it. So if they saw the product in Instagram, would they go to Amazon to read the reviews about it? Maybe. And so maybe Instagram, because people are not spending 10 hours a day on Amazon, they're spending 10 hours a day in Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and YouTube. And that's where they're going to be doing their purchases, not on Amazon. They're going to be doing their purchases in the social media apps. Once they make it one click simple for you, and that's why all the investors are rushing to throw billions of dollars into these one-click startups like Bolt that we just announced 5 minutes ago. Because when you're on Instagram, and now Instagram's making it possible for anyone to make their previous 5,000 photos they ever took, all of those products, every pants and shoes and shirt and hat and sunglasses and umbrella in the background you ever had in any of your 5,000 Instagram photos, are now going to be clickable and purchasable, and you'll get paid for people buying the umbrella in your Instagram photo or video from 3 years ago. You'll get a small commission. And then you'll start thinking, shit, well, what sort of content should I be making now that this monetization has come into e-commerce, social media? And it's going to change social media fundamentally, as it did in China with Pinduoduo. And you're going to say, maybe I should take photos of me with products that, I think people are going to buy. Yes, of course, you're going to do that. And then you're going to think to yourself, maybe I should make a video. Maybe a video would be better than a photo. And the answer is yes, a video is better than a photo. And then you're going to say to yourself, well, hang on a second. What if I did a really long video and showed all kinds of products in the video? And yes, that's an even better example. And that's where YouTube has been for the past 10 years. They have a decade head start on that. And then you're going to say to yourself, well, what if I did a live stream? And that's what Pinduoduo people had figured out 3 years ago. And that's what they're doing, is it's just thousands of people hopped up on meth doing live streams around the clock, selling all kinds of crazy shit, talking to the fans in real time via the message button. And they've got tens of thousands of people watching simultaneously. And they're a celebrity, and they're dancing around like Robin Williams on a mountain of meth, selling 24 hours a day. And they're making not millions, but they're approaching billions of dollars. Some of the top influencers in Pinduoduo are making nearly $1 billion at this point. So it's huge, it's massive, and so that's the future that's coming. Again, we've been saying it for 3 months, and now in the past 3 months, we've watched Instagram turn on to these features. We've watched YouTube and TikTok and Snapchat all announce their partnerships with Shopify to enable this. And we're watching them assemble the puzzle to finally make it all happen. Yeah.
Tyler, quick question.
Sorry. I also just wanted
Sorry.
to add one last thing about the metadata, because as I think at the Google event they already announced it, that obviously the AI will be able to detect elements in the videos and in the images. And what we do, for instance, is we also in our ads even we detect elements that might be interesting for users to click on. And I think that will be super helpful. That sometimes you'll have things in the background that you wouldn't think that people will be interested in, and if the AI can tag it and then put a link to the store to those elements, and then you start making money off of that, then you also as a creator discover what things people are looking to get and like what are they interested in, and that builds that recommendation engine for the creator on what they actually should be advertising as well. So the feedback will only come from like manual comments, but also from the AI
it's going
itself.
to get whoever builds the best recommendation systems that tells the creators what type of stuff to sell. All of that stuff will come into play, because the little mom and pop cake shop is not an influencer, but there's tons of influencers, millions of influencers in these apps that don't have products to sell themselves necessarily. And the app is going to solve that problem for both sides of that marketplace and say, you've got the eyeballs, you've got the products, you two should match, you two should not, so they're going to algorithmically connect everybody to the best benefit of everybody involved. And whoever does that most effectively is going to be the app that might win, until you start seeing meta apps that make it easy for the mom and pop cake shop to manage all the social media apps where they don't no longer really care. Same like a hotel uses Airbnb and Booking.com and Hotels.com and Agoda. The hotel doesn't really care which one sends the customer. And there are tools to let hotels manage all the different platforms that bring the money in. The same thing's likely to happen with the cake shop, where they don't really have to worry and make a choice between TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and whatnot. It's going to be one mother app that helps manage all the apps that bring in all the money in the same way that the hotels do today. So YouTube, by the way, just announced something in the past few hours called Super Thanks. This is YouTube's fourth paid digital good, which is what the platform calls any product that lets fans directly pay creators. So far, these tools include Super Chat, Super Stickers, and channel subscriptions. But Super Thanks is YouTube's brand new thing they just announced a few hours ago. It is YouTube's first of these features that allow fans to tip creators for individual uploaded videos rather than live streams. If a viewer wants to show extra appreciation for a video, they can pay creators with one of four preset amounts, ranging between $2 and $50 in their local currency. When viewers buy Super Thanks, they can leave a message which will appear highlighted in the comment section. So that's a clever thing. It might be a video that you hate and you just want to make sure that people see your response to the video. But now you got to pay for it. Very clever, these Google folks, by the way. YouTube's previous tools will direct payments to creators. Seems like a way to play catch up with Twitch, but the platform is now differentiating itself with Super Thanks. Even Instagram has features that lets users tip creators when they go live, like badges, but lacks a way for creators to receive a one-time payment for a post or a reel. Instead, Instagram has pivoted hard to e-commerce. Oh, gee, I wonder why. Which feels less like organic or
Tyler,
direct way for fans to engage with creators than product like Super Thanks. So it's sort of like a tip jar for a single video. Yes?
yeah, Tyler, quick question. From yesterday when we were talking about theft of IP by the Chinese from the United States, right? And I completely understand that and recognize it today, by the way that you and Charles explained it yesterday. Now, today, as we stand, after a decade or
Well,
two
by the way,
decades or three decades, we
it's
see
not
that the
how Charles
Chinese.
and I understand it. It's how the U.S. came together with the EU, the UK, Japan, Australia, Norway, and 10 others, and NATO to say that they were doing it. So it's not
Sure,
that Charles and I were saying it. It's that every country on
sure.
the planet is saying it. Yeah, go ahead.
I use the wrong words. Now, today, after decades, we see that the Chinese, and forgive me if I'm using the wrong words, and educate me if I am, the Chinese have the edge on certain portions of tech, or
Right.
social influence, or
Particularly,
social
yes,
commerce,
particularly the
etc.
areas that are ethically nebulous, like genetic engineering, which is, by the way, America had trouble even with stem cell research because you have parts of America who say
Well,
we shouldn't be doing stem cell research, and China laughs and says full steam ahead on stem cell research. So there's no ethical issue here at all.
let
If anyone has a
me
problem
go
with
for
it, you can go
let,
do some finger painting over there in the jail cell while we go straight forward full steam
let,
into all of these issues
hold-
that America is going to sit and debate endlessly on Clubhouse about whether or not it's ethical. That's fine. You guys can slow your ship down to a complete grind, your train down to a halt. Yeah.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't
Hey,
worry so much about that on the genetics front these days. Things are a little different. They're
guys,
quieter, but they're different than they were.
let's talk
Okay.
about Pinduoduo for a second. What we were talking about, right? So if you look at Pinduoduo, it looks to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, on Pinduoduo they've got an edge, right, on that particular vertical, and they apparently have innovated in this particular sector and vertical to begin with.
Yes. That's
Yes,
correct.
am I
That's
correct
right.
in assuming that? Now, now today it looks like YouTube and the rest of these amazing companies are coming out with these ideas. Now, how would we define this? We would not define this as theft of IP. We would define it as idea copying or innovation, or
Yeah.
what would we
Same
call
as
this?
you have apps copying Clubhouse. So you had Clubhouse come out as a format, and you had a whole lot of people copying it all over the world, including China. It's now it's to me it's still regrettable that apps are doing this today wherever they happen to be geographically, but it isn't so egregious when you get into really different markets, the same way that Uber was copied everywhere in the world, the same way that YouTube was copied everywhere in the world, the same way Google was copied everywhere in the world, and if we look at tech, starting as kind of the big explosion, the first bubble in 2000, people didn't really have the technology to copy the tech explosion of 2000, the first initial wave of the hype cycle that busted. Didn't really get copied anywhere because other than Stockholm, was the only country that was able technically to copy it. And Stockholm did have a stock market bust in 1999 that corresponded with America, but the cover of Newsweek talks all about it. Sweden was the only country technically capable of having its own strong startup ecosystem in 1999. So then that bubble popped, it went away for quite a while, and then it came back around strong around 2006, 5, 6. A lot of companies started around 2000, like Google, and then Facebook comes along, and all these apps come along, and those primarily American apps in the 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8s grew really big, and what they are today, in Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, all these apps that were Uber, which all got copied everywhere. Groupon was another one that got copied everywhere. And those were copied all over the planet. And
But what I'm getting
I,
at is the
I know,
direction is
yes, I know
reversed
what you're
now,
getting at.
correct?
And my point is that
Oh,
Snapchat, I'm sorry, what's this one that we're on? Clubhouse comes out and it gets copied everywhere on the planet. And what happens now is any app that clearly works in a significant way is going to get copied everywhere else on the planet. Buy now, pay later started in Stockholm, called Klarna, got copied everywhere on the planet. Spotify, going to get copied everywhere on the planet, also started in Stockholm. And now Pinduoduo started in China, works really well, going to be copied everywhere on the planet.
okay. So
Tyler, oh, go ahead, Pros.
no, go ahead, Ellis. I'm done. Go ahead. It's time.
Tyler, I just had a question for Charles, just if I may quickly on this thread, which was earlier as well, which was Charles, given your insight to the Biden administration, and it kind of touches upon what Faraz just said and what Tyler just commented on, is are we swinging the pendulum back from sort of Wall Street financial and more importantly, something that's personal to me, the venture capitalists like SoftBank and what they funded and this sort of rigged game of Wall Street and, these hyper extreme valuations, but they don't affect Main Street versus Wall Street. Do you think and have insight that the Biden, which you can reveal, I'm asking you publicly for a reason, I can ask you offline, but do you think that they're going to swing the pendulum back, given that the U.S. still controls the global economy or influences it for the most part because we're still the reserve currency? And do you think we're going to go back sort of from Wall Street to Main Street?
I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I think we're going to see that there's a lot of venture funds out there that are, in fact, money laundering operations for the mob or for foreign governments. And I think the Biden administration is well aware of that. And so I think we'll see a lot of these valuations come back down to earth as there's more pressure there. I think there will also be efforts to sort of go into a lot of these companies and sort of turn them to be working for U.S. interests, or to cut them off entirely from basically having access to the federal, to basically federal monies. You saw that obviously, the Trump administration, when how to put this, when the Jedi contract was being discussed, right, between a number of companies were trying to get access to the Jedi contract. You had Oracle, you had Microsoft, you had Amazon, you had a few others as well, but those were sort of the players. The Trump administration was very close to Oracle, given the relationship of Larry Ellison, and as a donor. And what ended up happening is they sort of split the baby and gave it to Microsoft. And now the Pentagon says, oh, well, we're going to review the contract. We're not going to give it to either Microsoft or Amazon. We're going to create a whole new contract. And of course, I suspect Amazon will then win that contract. And so I think what we're going to start to see just generally is we're going to start to see a lot of companies that don't have the most hygienic practices. They're going to be sort of shut out of all of the money that's coming in to do a lot of technology development. We're seeing this already with SpaceX losing its contract. I mentioned that last night. So I think that's sort of where things are going. I see a willingness on the part of Biden, and let's not forget he's 78 years old, right? That he sort of has a sort of 1950s, government big spending can actually achieve a lot of these objectives. And I think a lot of people are starting to glom onto that. You have the Endless Frontiers Act, which pushes some of this. So I think that's kind of where things are going. But I don't think I think a lot of these, venture funds that are sort of bidding things up over and over and over again, let's not forget you can't eat IRR, right? Like these things keep getting bid up, and up. But, so did WeWork, so did Jewel. And I think we'll see a lot more of these companies sort of flame out as time goes on. And that's sort of something to watch for.
Charles, may I
Hey,
make, if you allow, and then please correct me if I'm wrong. Charles,
Yeah,
is that
go
okay?
ahead. Go ahead.
So often enough, what I'm noticing, and Tyler, please play the X Files music if you wish after I'm done what I'm saying. So it's not just the venture funds. Often enough, with the wider audience and the mass population of the world, we think that a lot of the billionaires and the trillionaires of the planet are created because of hard work and success. And some of the big names of some of the largest firms on the planet that we take in this room happen to be because of hard work, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm talking about the financial firms that we've been referring to in this room, right? If you look at just some of the lineages of these individuals and the connections with the agencies of the largest countries in the world, it becomes apparent that a lot of these companies have connections vis-a-vis the individuals that founded them, and the reason that they exist through financial crises and et cetera, that there's a lot more going on behind closed doors, and there's a lot more intelligence firms, there's a lot more government agencies involved, and there's a lot more, let's just say, espionage involved. And that's just my humble opinion. Charles, correct me if I'm wrong and if your view is completely different than mine.
Well, I think it's quite interesting that, Larry Ellison named his company Oracle after the name of his code name for the
Thank you.
CIA. Or you could talk about, Jeff Bezos, his grandfather, being the number 4 employee at DARPA and running the Atomic Energy Commission.
Thank you.
I mean, we could go through them all if you want. I mean, it's worth doing at some point. Or Paul Allen's connections with Honeywell. Of course, Paul Allen was sort of forced out of Microsoft by Bill Gates in the 1980s and 90s, right around the time in which Bill Gates started being friends with Ghislaine Maxwell and the Maxwell family. So, yeah, I mean, I think that there's a concerted. I don't want to make it sound like a global conspiracy, but it probably is a global conspiracy. and that there are different assets that are developed by countries, and those assets are turned, by different intelligence services accordingly. Um, go and look up the pedigree of, say, a Chris Sacca on Wikipedia and see what he studied, and you tell me who you think he works for, or if you really believe Richard Branson's biography that's been released, it's quite interesting and weird. So I do agree. I do tend to agree that there is a sort of ruling class in each of these countries that are sort of allowed to be billionaires, and that might actually affect those of us who would favor a more equal distribution of income, or perhaps a less crazy distortion. That might kind of explain why we're seeing a lot of what we're seeing. And of course, there are certain colleges where these people come out of, and certain institutions that they come out. I mean, one can read the history of America Online, for instance, or of Carly Fiorina at HP, and one comes to the conclusion rather quickly that there really is a deep state, and that deep state is involved in building technology companies, financial firms, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think it's too crazy to think that. I just think it's very gauche to admit that publicly.
Can I?
Monica, you want
Go
to
ahead.
comment?
Tyler, I wanted to bring attention to something that was being said earlier, and since Faraz is here, happy Eid to you, Faraz, and to everybody here who is there. But I'll whenever there is a next time, let me know. I have done some numbers, and this is to answer Faraz's question about the U.S. Economy and how much of wealth is actually, or
Well
market
done,
cap
Monica.
is controlled by FACMA.
Well done. What do you got?
Sorry, I just needed to get those numbers out there.
What percent of the American GDP
Share
is
with
big
us,
tech?
Monica.
Not of America's GDP, but I know of the 100 top companies in America because this has just come out. I've marked you guys as well in CC there. This is about 7.7 trillion is actually owned by 5 companies, which is about 1/3 of the market cap of the top 100 companies of the world is actually owned of the top 65 companies which America leads in or has ownership of is actually FAGMA, and that accounts for 7.6 trillion in market cap. And America is home to 65% of all top American companies globally, and that accounts for 20.5 trillion in money in market cap. Now, so
But
that is
that's
interesting.
global, Monica. That's global GDP though, not U.S. GDP, right?
That's not US GDP, and this is US versus the world. This actually just speaks to the fact that even in America, the top 5 companies, that the ones that we are talking about in the top 10 are actually American and account for $7.6 trillion out of the 22 trillion that America is responsible for in the top 100 companies.
Yeah.
That is huge,
So
absolutely staggering.
I want to see if
Yeah.
anyone on stage has a headline to share because Mengdi often is in the audience. I invited her up, but just in case anybody has something hot from their part of the world, geographically or professionally, because I do have now 50 cherry picked the most interesting 50 headlines that have happened in the past 24 hours, which are even more interesting than many of the what the reporters are reporting on. So if anyone's got something from their part of the world, especially people like Megdi who don't join us every day, anyone have something?
No, but Tyler, I just wanted to make, if I could, just a quick comment on what
Monica,
just
yeah.
was just discussed. So, um, this is more all this wealth disparity in the United States is mostly caused because of where our tax laws are and our failure to enforce antitrust laws, as opposed to I don't think there's a vast conspiracy. Someone mentioned Jeff Bezos and whatever his background is. I can tell you because I was really close to it at the time. Um, People don't realize how close Amazon came to an absolute bankruptcy right before the internet bubble blew up because they just had gotten a convertible bond offering for like $1.2 billion at really rich pricing right before the bubble burst. And if they had waited, if another week had gone by, you couldn't do a convertible bond offering in a crash market, and they would have run out of money and they would have gone bankrupt. And Jeff Bezos' parents, who lent him $300,000 to start the company, would have been wiped out. So I
Who did
mean,
who did Jeff Bezos's stepfather work for?
Well, I don't know, but I don't know why
He
that's
worked for
relevant.
he worked for the CIA. Just to be
Okay,
clear about this.
so we did.
So
So, but that doesn't mean that he was guaranteed success with Amazon because of that.
no, it just does kind of tilt the playing field somewhat
No, no,
in
there's
his
there's
favor.
definitely people who are born with advantages. There's no question about it. You know, if you're the Bush family and your legacies,
But
yeah,
you
I
made
understand
you
all of
yourself,
that.
Ken. You
No
made the
one's
comment
disputing
yourself
that.
that they've avoided regulation.
Oh yes, that's
Maybe
true.
there's a
But I
connection
think
there.
that's because our political
Uh,
process is corrupt with
or
money,
or
which is
more
why they
more
don't. We're
correctly
not enforcing antitrust
influence,
laws.
which is often a result of
And
money, which might be
Influence,
family.
yeah, yes,
No, no,
correct.
no.
I agree with that. Yeah.
When the Graham family sold Bezos, the Washington Post, when they sold it to him, they said we couldn't imagine selling this out of the family. Who is the family? You know, like that's a very interesting question. And if you go and you look at these things, you know, Neil Stephenson, of course, great science fiction writer, has consulted with the CIA. He's the one who was with Jeff Bezos when they made the decision to start Blue Origin. I mean, look, I favor this, just to be very clear about this. Like, I think this is actually a good thing for the world, to actually have a responsible elite running it. I think this elite has to be responsible and can't, you know, turn people into slaves like is increasingly happening all
Industrial
throughout the world.
athletes, Charles. They're called
But
industrial athletes.
yes, I guess that's what we're supposed to call them. But yes, I mean, I tend to favor this, and yet you're quite right, Ken. Like, Bezos could very well have gone out of business, and yet he didn't. And in 2014, for the first time ever, the CIA decided it was going to do a giant cloud business, and it awarded the Amazon contract no bid. I would like to get $600 million from the government no bid for projects I'm working on. I have a company that I invested in that got $1 billion no bid from the U.S. government. So I'm well aware that these things get kind of rigged from here and there. So I don't want to say that I think this is a you know, if your point is basically as Tyler was alluding to, you know, there's a big reason we don't enforce the antitrust laws in this country, which is that we don't want a whole lot of smaller companies that can be subsumed by foreign adversaries, that can be messed about with. I mean, if you look at the consolidation of the defense technology industry over the last 50 years, since essentially World War II, you know, you can kind of see that there's basically an oligopoly of 4 or 5 companies, and those companies have very strict regulatory rules that they follow, um, and that's to basically ward off spies. So, I mean, I think I would just say in general, we like to believe in the West, and I myself like to believe this, that, you know, we're all plucky individuals who pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But I have a hard time, you know, believing that, you know, these things are as much hard work. I mean, everybody works
Meritocracy
hard,
issue. Yeah.
right? So the
Yeah.
meritocracy I don't think is as real as I would like it to be.
And I just
I
want to
would just
comment. I'm
go.
sorry, Ken. If I may comment one side, and Tyler knows this, and I don't like to be on this damn soapbox because I'm a former Marine, but something Martin Luther King said, and to Charles's point, it's hard to pull yourself up by your bootstraps when you don't have any boots. And so sometimes you're right, you just keep working it, you keep iterating, you keep building, you don't make excuses, you just keep doing it. Because also another note that Apple almost went out of business, I think 20 years ago, or almost 25 years ago, and Microsoft made them a $300,000 or $400,000 loan.
Yeah,
Someone can research
that's
this,
right.
but this is fact. And did a partnership to bail them out.
Well,
I mean, like,
they
you
didn't
know,
have
and they were
Microsoft didn't have a choice
adversaries.
because it would leave them as a sole monopoly if Apple went out of business.
Right, but they were straight up adversaries,
Yes and
Tyler, and it's
no.
like,
Very,
who
very
approved
friendly
this?
adversaries.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry, what?
they were also
Tyler,
Okay.
codependent because Apple was writing much of the they were writing for each other's platform. The Microsoft was writing a lot of software for Apple, and they really didn't want Apple to go out of business for self monopoly, you know, reasons. So they had a love hate relationship.
Right, and then I was going to just add just one more point on that Apple story though, and Apple almost went bankrupt or just basically went under again, and I was there when, not there physically, but when Apple kind of re-engineered themselves by negotiating with the music industry because they were building the iPod to get the 99-cent digital rights songs, which the music industry said, well, ripped us off and sued us because they used to sell CDs at that time, which I know you remember, Tyler, because you're older like me. And so the music industry is still reeling from that because they didn't know what digital music was and all these things. And that kind of put Apple in the foray, which is great products that have come later. But this was like when everyone had a CD and a Walkman. So, there's always times when in an economy when companies can go bust or almost about to go bust. But now Apple's a $1 trillion company and we see where we're
What if
at.
I were to tell you, LS, that the reason Apple was able to get away with killing the record industry in much the same way that Netflix is allowed to get away with killing the film industry, two industries, by the way, historically that are very mobbed up, is that our deep state wants to take away the power of the music industry and the movie industry, both of which have been historically mobbed up. Maybe that's what's actually going on there.
X-Files music, Tyler.
I
So,
shed
so
no
anyway, the point
tears
I
for
was
the
going
death
to
of
make,
the
by the
music
way,
industry,
if
by
I
the way.
can,
Go ahead, Ken.
I just wanted to make a very quick point here. My grandparents were immigrants, and they ended up being retail store owners. They never owned stocks. My father was an electrician. My mother was a
Okay,
public
what's the
school teacher.
enough
My
motivators?
parents never owned a
What's the
stock.
point?
I'm the first person who's ever owned a stock in my family. So it's not just like old money that benefits by some of these tax laws. I've benefited by them. Quite frankly, I'm not saying that they're good just because I benefited from them. I'm just saying that it's possible because I have issues from a public policy perspective with some of the way we deal with capital gains and carried interest on hedge funds and VC firms and all of that. Even though I benefited from it, but it's not just because people came from old money or legacies. I mean, new money could benefit by having tax laws and antitrust laws that don't work also. So it's not just this whole. That's why just the only
Okay,
point I want to make. There's a
got you.
structural
So
problem.
speaking,
Would you like to hear about the top countries with the highest wealth inequality? Since we're kind of generally on that subject, it's kind of surprising
Thailand
actually.
#1. Yeah.
Number one is the Netherlands. Number two is Russia. Number three is
Yep.
Sweden.
Which
Number four
every
is
Swede
United
knows, by the
States,
way.
then followed by Brazil,
Yeah.
Thailand, Denmark,
Yeah, Sweden
Philippines.
and Thailand, where I work and live, both are incredibly high on that list. Sweden because of the
How real do we think those numbers
they
are,
are.
though? I mean, the informal economy in California alone
He,
is
he's
probably
talking
double
about he's
the
talking
size.
about
I
the
mean,
wealth disparity gap between the haves and the have-nots is the stat.
right. What
Yeah,
I'm saying, though,
within
is
the
that there are
country,
a lot
within
of
the country.
people. What I'm saying is that there are a lot of people who do not report any of their earnings, right? Because they're in the, shall we call them, informal economy, right? I mean, Tyler, you and I have lived in California, and there are whole parts of
Yeah,
California that are essentially all
correct.
cash
Yeah,
economies, right?
especially where
So
we're from
I'm
in San
sure that's
Diego.
all
Yeah,
being
so
dutifully reported.
there's
Yes, I suspect that's all being dutifully reported on everyone's
of
taxes, of course.
course.
Um, but
That's a
but I
good
do wonder
point.
sometimes, like, how much we can actually measure a lot of these things. But I take your point, Dan, about
Yeah,
the
in the
unequal
case of
question.
Sweden and Thailand, it's largely due to one family in each country. In the case of Sweden, it's the Wallenberg family, which owns 30% of the stock market in their holdings of the large industrial complex companies that they've, passed down over generations. And they play an incredibly significant role. And I have to say, I mean, they play a very, very intentionally low key role. They don't do interviews or anything like that, but they do an incredible amount of funding for AI. Believe it or not, they're the biggest funder of AI in Europe. Actually, just out of their own. Here's 100. What was it? Yeah, 300 million to help do AI in Sweden. It's like they do some wildly cool stuff. And then you have in Thailand the equivalent in the CP group. Dara is not only the wealthiest man in Thailand, he's the fourth wealthiest man in Asia out of Thailand, and he has a complete monopoly on the chicken, uh, shrimp, and rice, which are Thailand's three big food exports. He has monopolized all three, and he owns all the 7-Elevens, which is all of the incoming, is where everybody spends all of their money, is in 7-Elevens, believe it or not. So he gets everybody's paycheck eventually, and then he does all the exports. So he really controls Thailand very fundamentally. In fact, there was a huge celebrity. One of Thailand's biggest celebrities yesterday made huge news in Thailand. The biggest news in Thailand yesterday was one of Thailand's biggest superstars took to Facebook because he had COVID recently, and he's asking this, patriarch of Thailand, Dara, who, by the way, well, I'll save that for a second. This celebrity is committing career suicide on Facebook by saying, "Hey, Dara, you're the world's, you're the richest man, in this part of Southeast Asia. Our country's dying. We now have Delta. Please do something. Why don't you do something? Like, you own all the 7-Elevens, which you employ by a factor of 1,000x the most people in Thailand, and you're the biggest employer. You're the biggest, everything. You own everything. You essentially own Thailand economically. Please do something. And why aren't you doing more?" And then Dara responded, and Dara said, just so you know, we've already committed billions of dollars, and here's the receipts. And when the pandemic started, he was able to leverage his relationship with China to get a mask making machine factory, to build a mask making factory so that Thailand would have masks, because he foresaw very early, we're going to need a lot more masks than we have today. We don't have them. We're screwed. We don't just want to buy masks from China. We need to make them here. Hey, China, do me a solid. I'm one of your biggest trading partners on the planet. Is me, individual as a person, is one of your biggest trading partners, because Thailand is the source of your food, by the way. So could you please give us some of these mask making machines? I don't want to buy your masks. I need the machines. Thank you very much. And they gave them, just to show you how powerful this dude is. So he got the mask making machines, built the mask making factories, and he told this celebrity, "You probably didn't know, but all those masks everyone wearing, yeah, I provided those." So what was your question again? So that's how big of a wealth disparity gap there is in Thailand. And that's how big of a wealth disparity gap there is in Sweden. And they're tremendous, and they're huge, and they're phenomenally big. But it's because of two incredibly wealthy families, unimaginably wealthy, that caused those statistics in those two cases. Yeah.
Yeah, I must say I don't really have a problem with wealth disparity if the people who are being wealthy are actually doing things like providing masks or providing, actual services. So I think where the problem gets into it when people are parasitic, like say Facebook, for
So
instance.
this leads perfectly into
You
Sam
know,
Altman's, I think, very prescient blog post he did about 6 weeks ago, where he says, due to quantum computing and AIs, whoever is able to truly harness the future technologies of like AI and quantum computer will have an asymmetrical advantage, the likes of which we've never seen before. And we're very likely to see this trend get wildly exacerbated, because tech is growing exponentially while humans are growing biologically. And that gap, we're watching it spread right now. And we're now getting to a point where the gap between the tech geeks, let's just simplify and call it the geeks who have harnessed the power of tech, are economically growing. And we're seeing this in the headlines of, oh, during COVID, look who benefited: Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all of the geeks made all the money. Everyone else suffered during COVID, and these people are making $1 billion a day because they're the geeks and they've figured out how to harness the tech and the power and whatever. That trend, those geeks are going up a curve that is going to go straight to the moon. Everyone else is on a curve going straight sideways, if not down. And those curves continue. Hold
And
on, Atlas.
Tyler,
Imagine those curves continuing into the future, and the gap between the haves and the have-nots is going to it's just starting. It's going to get much, 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 much worse, because the technologies are getting better. The AIs are getting smarter. Quantum computing is coming online. And as the geeks continue to do that and the other people don't do that, the gap is going to get unbearable. And historically, that's what leads to revolutions every time, without exception.
And
So
then to make the point, you can look at my profile picture. This dude just went to space, and he thanked his workers and his customers for that.
well, yeah, sure. That was him just saying you guys made it possible. But Tyler, to your point earlier, which is intriguing to me, and I'm focused on AI, as you know, but the Sweden family pivoting, you said that they were the richest family in Sweden before, but then they pivoted to AI.
Not at all.
Oh,
They're not. They're
Well,
funding,
okay, if they were rich
but
before, what
you're
were
correct
their?
to point out it's not a coincidence that they have a deep interest in AI. They're the biggest funder of AI from a research perspective, and that's not a coincidence because they
Well, yeah,
understand
that's
that
my point.
that's what's
What I'm
coming.
saying is that they're
It's
old
very
money,
old,
though, right?
multi-generational. Yeah,
They're old money. Yeah, see, so that blows my mind. Like how some people can wake up, but the masses don't. Here is old money, generational money, and then it knows where it's going versus real estate or people I talk to. And I'm in AI, that, and Charles and all those. We're in tech news. We kind of get it in this room, but there's a lot of masses of the people that don't get tech. They're consumers of technology, but they don't understand where the technology is going. And it's interesting to me because this is, old generational wealth in Sweden, which probably would have been agriculture, real estate,
industrial
farming,
in this
whatever.
case.
And now they're
Yeah.
funding AI. I'm sorry,
In
what?
Sweden's case, it's the industrial companies. They own the majority shares of all the big industrial complexes in Sweden, which are many. Sweden is an industrial powerhouse.
And now this family, the richest family or one of them, is now funding a lot of
Yes.
AI research.
So, and they're super smart. And they do chime in with comments from time to time politically when they feel it's important to do so. And they're usually incredibly thoughtful in their comments when they do. I have nothing. Yeah,
Sam is a friend of mine, Sam
yeah,
Altman, the
yeah.
blog post you mentioned, and I don't really buy the coming AI catastrophe. Um, because I think human beings are constantly creating new jobs and that human beings are constantly finding sources of meaning and that we're very special. Um, but and so I think a lot of these kind of conversations, they sort of set up the political solution of a UBI, which is something that I don't
Right.
think is a good idea. Just from a religious perspective, we're commanded to work. There's sort of questions about the dignity of work. And if it were true that all these, AI systems are going to make everyone lose their jobs, if that were true, why have we not really seen that in a serious way across
Yeah.
the whole economy? More likely, and it's Clearview.ai, right? So it's an AI company. What we did in building that company was just automating, the process by which cops go through mugshots and decide, who's a criminal and who's not. Um, and so technology, it was the cops plus this technology which allowed them to solve still more murders, rapes, crimes, etc. So I'm just not as persuaded by the sort of doom and gloom, and we have to take seriously that Sam runs OpenAI. OpenAI is a sort of strange creature that's sort of funded by Microsoft to the tune of $1 billion. There are all sorts of questions about its own financing, its own relationships with people like Reid Hoffman, who was implicated with the Jeffrey Epstein situation. So there's all sorts of interesting questions around AI research. And same thing goes with quantum. Masha Drakova, who I mentioned the other day, she's very, very interested in quantum research. And she, of course, was, Jeffrey Epstein's publicist before she was that. She worked as the sort of youth leader of Putin's Russia. So I happen to be much more skeptical of a lot of these claims and these problems being as dangerous as people claim. Human beings are very precious. We're capable of inventing new jobs, whole new categories. There are whole planets to go to. There are diseases to cure. We haven't even begun to even explore the oceans, let alone our solar system or our genetics. There's lots and lots of frontiers to go. And this idea that we're going to lose frontiers, I'm
I
not
get
quite
your point.
buying it.
There's still so much to do innovation wise, but it's people need to be able to participate in that process, I guess. Okay, we've not got through the top 10 yet. Check this one out. HBO Max partners with Snapchat. Truly brilliant and not at all a surprise because HBO Max is like Netflix and it's a subscription service and we talked about the eyeball race. They want to keep your eyeballs as long as possible. Snapchat is also trying to keep your eyeballs. Netflix is competing with YouTube. YouTube's trying to compete with Snapchat and TikTok. where YouTube's trying to make, they call it YouTube Shorts. They just announced it as their competition with TikTok, which is not so different from Snapchat. It's really short form content. And these video distribution networks like HBO, the subscription platforms like HBO Max and Netflix, are going to start doing really short content. They're going to compete with YouTube. They're all in competition with each other for your eyeballs, is the quick summary of the point here. And so in doing so, Netflix wants Snapchat-like content, so does HBO. HBO just partnered with Snapchat to let users in the US co-watch pilots of select series with up to 63 other users for free via a Snap Mini. In a bid to boost signups to its streaming service, HBO Max is partnering with Snap to bring free episodes from its original programming to Snapchat users. And no doubt you're going to start seeing Snapchats show up in HBO Max while in between shows that you're trying to figure out what to watch. It'll show you the best of the Snapchat content relevant to you. And it's going to be really interesting to see how the short form content is racing to be longer and the longer form content is racing to become shorter as they all try and become omni content, which includes audio. And that's why Spotify is going into video. And that's why Amazon just bought a podcasting network for their Amazon Prime. And they're all going to become omni-channel content of short form, long form, medium form, audio only, podcasts, live audio rooms where these idiots get into a room and talk nonstop about tech headlines. It's all coming to all the platforms eventually because they all want a piece of that big content pie. And it's all going to get transcribed into multiple languages simultaneously and indexed into a futuristic search engine before you know it. There's your tip, Google. You got to buy Clubhouse before it's too late. So that was that headline. Product Hunt's Josh Buckley and others launched something called Hyper, a $60 million early stage fund offering $300,000 checks, mentorship network, and product hunt distribution. Oh, little asymmetrical advantage for people who get fundraising from Product Hunt now get featured more in Product Hunt. Okay, I see how you're playing that. We will have to ask Ryan next time he does a drive-by here in Tech News Around the World how he feels about that. So interesting though that a platform, basically Product Hunt, where apps get visibility, they're now doing investment. That's totally obvious. That makes sense. But to give an asymmetrical advantage to the companies they invest in, that's kind of old school. Anyway, it's interesting. Videos of Tesla customers using full self-driving beta 9 rolled out to select users show a system that seems dangerous for users to be testing on public roads, is the headline from Consumer Reports, and speaks to Charles's point, which is we're still quite far away from autonomous. And if people get the wrong idea and they think they do have full autonomy, gets a little unsafe, as this headline implies. And so the Consumer Reports car safety experts worry that Tesla continues to use vehicle owners as beta testers for its new features. They're not only just beta testers, they're financial subsidizers. They're paying for the future development of all of this fully autonomous vehicles, which when they do become level 5 autonomous, Tesla will no longer sell them to the individuals because they'll be worth too much as transportation vehicles in an autonomous fleet to deliver all of the e-commerce goods and foods and delivery of all of your supermarket shit. And of course, they'll let you ride in the car if you just scan your iris, and they can get all of that juicy iris data out of you. Oh, what am I talking about? Do you not know what I'm referring to? Oh, yeah. When you scan your iris, they can tell your gender, your age, your biometric identity, your physical health, if you've had a concussion, chronic pain, vision disorders, obesity, or Parkinson's disease, your mental health, if you suffer from depression, PTSD, autism, or eating disorders, if you're an extrovert, introvert, high in curiosity, your level of sleepiness, your drug consumption of alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, MDMA, and cannabis, just to name a few. And that's very useful data that they previously didn't have that you, of course, will willingly give up for a free ride down the street. So they're no longer going to sell the cars anymore once it reaches level 5 autonomy. But thank you for funding our autonomous fleet delivery system. So next up is a report that the UK suspends grants to its largest computer chip fab, Newport Wafer Fab, which was bought by a Dutch firm owned by China's Wingtech amid national security concerns. So the UK says, nope, no computer chips for China. We see what you did there. You tried to go through a Dutch firm. make it look like the Dutch were buying this thing, and we figured it out. It's actually owned by Chinese, so we're canceling the sale of our largest chip provider to China because the West no longer likes what China's been up to, and they're putting an end to it. And you'll see headlines about that every day now for the next 3 years. And Google unveils a public preview of Google Cloud Armor adaptive protection and ML-powered service for Google Cloud apps and sites to protect against DDoS attacks, what are called distributed denial of service attacks. So yeah, the cloud needs to protect itself because that's where everyone's storing all their data. And money transfer company used to be called TransferWise. They now call themselves Wise. They did go public on the London Stock Exchange just a few weeks ago. And now they're doing their quarter report for those who have been with us from the very beginning when we started now an hour and a half ago. I'm sorry, 2.5 hours ago when we talked about how Netflix did their quarter report, which was kind of mixed, came kind of down the middle. But now TransferWise had their very first report because they've only just publicly listed a few weeks ago. And TransferWise reports Q1 revenue up 43% year over year. They are growing that's rocket ship growth. Anything over 30% is rocket ship growth. 43% year over year in its first earnings report since going public on the London Stock Exchange. Money transfer company Wise, as they're now called, on Tuesday said revenue of $168 million in the first quarter of its first financial year, up 43% year over year. And pay attention, banks. You're worried about the neobanks, and you should be. And you're worried about AI-generated mortgage, you should be. And you're worried about buy now, pay later, and you should be. And you should be worried about remittance companies like TransferWise, and you should be. And you're going to bleed by 1,000 paper cuts by all of these fintech unicorns. They're coming at you from every angle, and they're outdoing you in every angle they come at you at. And your days are done. You're done. The banks are going to be done, and these fintechs are going to bleed them dry from 1,000 cuts from 1,000 different angles. That's what's happening. Pay attention. So Chrome 92 for iOS enables Face ID and Touch ID protection of incognito tabs, full page screenshot support, and more. And Google's rolling out Chrome 92 for iOS today. Hallelujah. With a number of new user-facing features and tweaks, including enabling Face ID and Touch ID to protect your incognito tabs where you do all of that sleazy, dirty stuff, you dirty dogs, doing all that sleazy stuff on your incognito tabs, and now you've got it protected now. No one can see it unless they've got your thumb or your face as biometric. Very interesting. Revolut, one of those super big fintechs we were just talking about, one of those neobanks that just raised a shit ton of money from SoftBank, launches Stays, which lets users book hotels and other accommodations via its app. First in the UK, followed by Europe and the US in the coming months. Revolut's realizing that Booking.com is a shit show, and thank God other people are getting into this game. Because Booking and Airbnb are becoming unbearable. And let's see if let's see if the other neobanks start becoming super apps by adding all kinds of interesting things, like Revolut launches what they call Stays. That's actually quite interesting and non-obvious. But Revolut launched a new feature Tuesday called Stays, which lets users book hotels and other accommodations through its app. Very interesting. And by the way, they very likely in the future will allow you to book a car, which is not their car. But the car distribution networks, which will be Tesla versus Google versus Amazon in the future at some point, will then partner with all the other apps to get their users, kind of bundled in. The same way that Google Maps does today, where you're on Google Maps and it's like, hey, you want an Uber for that to get there instead of a bike? And because that was an Uber Google partnership until Google replaces Uber with their own Waymo system. So in Phoenix, where Waymo is operating today, I'm sure you can't have Uber as an option, I'm sure, but you do have Waymo as an option in Google Maps if you're in Phoenix. Somebody can check that for us if they happen to be in Phoenix. But you're going to see, these other apps start to merge with each other through these APIs gone willy-nilly, where you'll book. Every app's going to become a super app. And it's going to be a battle to see who becomes the ultimate super app. And how do we know this? Because this is what happened in China with WeChat. In WeChat, you can book cars. In WeChat, you can book dates. In WeChat, you can book restaurants. In WeChat, you can pay for anything. In WeChat, you can buy a fucking house because it's become the center of focus, and all the other apps realize, rather than make it our own app, we can, but why not do a deal with WeChat to take advantage of the fact that people just live inside of WeChat and push our products and services into WeChat through the back door, through a pipe, which is called an API. And one app will eventually win them all, which is WeChat in China. And this Revolut launching Stays is potentially the same, because the Revolut did not do deals with every hotel on the planet. They tapped into APIs that allow the bookings of all of these it's a white labeled API, and they can brand it themselves as Revolut Stays. But you're seeing the beginnings of apps becoming omni apps, or super apps, as they're called in China. Yes.
Tyler, you know what's really
May.
interesting about
Tell
that?
me,
And not
May,
to
what's
take it down
interesting
a little
about it?
bit of a commerce rabbit hole, but Revolut is an on-ramp for
Yes, they do
crypto.
crypto.
And could you imagine the possibility that they get Stays and Airbnb and Expedia don't accept crypto? Ding, 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 ding. They literally just
Yeah,
ka-chinged it all the way because they step in as the
smart.
first mover, and they
That's
do it
I
subtly.
like what you're cooking, May. You're right. If the apps that hold crypto, and you bring up a bigger point, which is Square is an app that's a fintech app that holds, it's a wallet, and this wallet is going to continue to add more and more features and more places to spend that crypto. And that could become super interesting indeed, because then the end user, which is you, has you're storing your money in this wallet app as crypto, and now it can do all kinds of other products and services, like call the car, like I was talking about, and maybe that gets paid for from your crypto holdings. And then you book a hotel, as Revolut is doing, and as Amaz's exactly right, you can hold crypto in the Revolut wallet, and now you can book this hotel, and why not take it from your crypto holdings? And then you buy the house, as I mentioned. Next thing you know, you're buying a house with your crypto holdings. It becomes really interesting for crypto in that way. Yeah.
Well,
Oh, and
Tyler,
Tyler, oh, I'm
Tyler, there's
sorry, May.
another.
Oh, I'm
Tyler,
sorry,
there's.
May. Oh, go
Let me
ahead.
just. Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry. I'll make it quick, Tyler. There's also another thread to that, and the other thread to that is that now, if you look at the company doing it, that means they're accepting someone's BTC, right? They're accepting someone's Ethereum. Now, as the market's already starting to lean towards acceptance of all this, slowly, right? Slowly, but it's getting there, right? You imagine that these unsuspecting folks are like, yeah, I'm going to use my BTC. Yeah, I'm going to use my Ethereum. But they don't see the value of actually holding on to it because they're actually putting it to the company. It's a bit like Revolut's. If Revolut does something like this with Stays, inevitably they would have cryptocurrency on their balance sheet. And that would, in essence, make them more valued later because someone's just FOMOing and they're just excited to use it and put it into use. But as Ben in the audience on stage, Ben knows, I'd never ever use a BTC for that, ever. But alas, if they understand it, which they do, Revolut's been around since 2017, they are also finding a way to get that crypto into their company, into their organization. And they are actually moved out of England and put their banking into Lithuania. So they are not even under
So check this out.
UK.
Hang
So
on, May. We
it's
just
very
got
interesting.
Renjint in the audience. Renjint, you clever dog. So goddamn clever, this kid. He's done this now like 3 times. Holy smokes. Thank you, Renjit. Renjit just reminded us. I don't even think we brought it up in tech news, but there was a headline. How old was this headline, Renjit? Like 5 days ago, 6 days ago? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Hardly
Yes.
a week
So
ago.
booking.com about 5, 6 days ago jumped all hot on the mic with this big headline that booking.com is launching their fintech team. And so now you've got Revolut, which is the fintech team, launching their booking team, which is likely. Oh, I would have loved to see the email threads between those two companies lately. Interesting.
It may take only Booking.com may take a long to launch a fintech, but on the other side, it won't take much for Revolt to
Correct.
do this booking thing because they are startup. They
Yeah,
are pretty
because
fast in all these stuff.
Booking.com has a bit of an interesting financial problem, and I can say this as a resort owner who uses Booking.com, which is there's this weird frictions that happen around the transferring of all of the money and everything. It's a complete headache. Resorts hate it, and they hate Booking.com generally, but they need to introduce this fintech solution to solve the problem, put some grease in the wheels and make the machine run much smoother. And curious to see how this Revolut thing could evolve. Really interesting. Anyway, but certainly they're somehow related in some way that we don't yet fully understand. But that's a really interesting non-coincidence.
Well,
Yeah,
well, Tyler, you have a location yourself, right? I mean, if you just imagine all the drama to get
yeah.
paid, you know what I'm saying? Resort owners and property owners are going to be like, pardon my French, fuck this shit. We want an easier way to get paid, because if you cut out those middle people, you as
Oh, you know what though,
a resort holder owner,
you might have just figured something out accidentally
yeah.
because you said that Revolut might hold the BTC, the Bitcoin that the person is spending for the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
However, the big
Yeah.
problem that Booking has is, as the hotel, you have two choices, and it's not your choice, it's the person who books choice. What happens is they book the hotel, and then the hotel either has to collect the payment when they arrive by charging their credit card when they arrive, or they the platform, meaning Booking.com, will charge the customer, but you don't get that money for at least a month after they've left. So many hotels are like, you know what?
The
Right, I
settlement
don't.
time. The
Right. So
settlement
many
time.
hotels have to make this difficult choice of, do I want to wait a month or not? And if I don't want to wait a month, I need to charge their credit card. But in many countries, um, charging credit cards is a real pain in the ass. Like Thailand, we don't do.
Well, and that's I'm
Hold
Tyler.
on,
That's why I
Alice.
was going to bump
Hold
in
on, Alice.
earlier,
We
but
don't
we
do
forget.
credit cards in
Oh,
Thailand, by the way. We still don't, even though we've gone digital payments. It's not on credit cards. So hotels in Thailand don't want credit cards, and they don't want to wait a month. Thais do not socially will not wait. They don't believe you're going to get the money. If I don't get the money now up front, there's no deal. That's Thai society. There's no trusting anybody about getting paid in a month, let alone 24 hours. No, that doesn't happen. You pay me now, and then we do whatever we're going to do. Nobody does anything until they're paid here. Never, ever, for nothing, ever, never. So um, Thailand really struggles with this issue, but Revolut might say, okay, you're booking this, we've got your wallet, and they can become an escrow account like PayPal and tell the hotel, we've just put the money into an escrow account that the guest cannot touch, so they can't retract it, but you won't get it until they arrive. But right when they arrive, we give it to you. And that solves the biggest problem for hotels. And that could be super, super interesting. But to do that, hotel, you need to have a Revolut account. That's it. And by the way, hotels will sign up for Revolut accounts like gangbusters and start promoting that as their main way that they want people to book. By the way, they're going to start saying, "Oh, we don't even want to fuck with Booking.com no more. Please book through Revolut from now on, please," because they just solved our biggest problem. Yeah,
But Tyler, very quickly, because I know
yeah.
Ellis wants to share something, but very quickly, you just hit the nail on the head. Because if we sew this back to Visa getting
well,
involved with
that's where I was
crypto,
going,
ding,
girl.
ding,
But
ding,
go
ding,
ahead,
ding,
Ding. You
there it
done took it away. That's where I was going. You can go ahead and have it, Ma, because I was trying to get it in, but she done beat me to it. But it's the whole Visa macro thing, and you can
Yes.
finish it, and I'm done, Tyler,
Okay.
because that
Thank
will then
you.
go to Thailand. Okay, but go ahead, Ma.
Yes, correct. Because basically, Visa's logo's been on Revolut since 2017. And when I was working in Belgium, I used Revolut to get my coffee and my cafe and
Well,
my
what's the
acai
point?
bowl. And it was super chill. But the point is that I was able to buy products and I had a little bit of crypto on there and it
Right,
was
but we
taken
don't
from the
take credit.
crypto.
We don't take
So it
credit
was
cards
already
in Thailand.
working as no, but it's it's actually
We don't
debit.
take debit cards in Thailand.
But then help me
They take
understand
We
how all
cash
take
the
and phone
tech,
cash
pay.
and direct bank
how do
transfers.
all the, well, so now If that is the case, I can still give my IBAN number
No,
from Revolut
no,
to
no,
pay for it as a
no.
bank
You
transfer.
need what's called prompt pay.
It will
When we
work
say
as a bank
bank
transfer.
transfer, you need a Thai bank account to transfer to my Thai bank account. Yeah.
Okay, got it. So that's a bit like, it's super
Or a
fascinating,
Singapore
Tyler.
bank account and
Yeah,
very
that's
soon a
actually,
Malaysian bank
yeah,
account.
that's very, very fascinating. And I'll tell you why, because this is really hysterical. I always get Thailand and Indonesia confused, so bear with me. But if in fact the Dutch did colonize that region, did they
Indonesia.
not?
Thailand's never been colonized, and they're very proud of that
Okay.
fact.
Okay, got it. The unique part about it that I see is at some point Revolut is also a bank. So if they're able to use that as a form of payment as a traveler, then obviously you would be settled in your payment fast because it would be connected to the visitor, the traveler's account, the bank account, and it would have the logo on it, right? So it could be used as credit or debit. But when they process it with the actual hotel, they would be doing it in a way that the settlement would happen immediately because it is connected to their bank account. So I do see where the hotel or the resort owner would see that as a more valuable option because it is literally treated like a MasterCard debit card as well. Like it's got the logo on it and it's super seamless to use. It's as if I was using my debit card and it's super seamless. It takes directly out of the account. So it's opaque to the hotel or the resort owner where the money is being pulled from the person holding the card because they're getting
Yeah,
settled
the
so
next thing
quickly.
that's going to happen, we can
And
predict
then
because Square allows businesses to accept credit cards, and it's a Square POS system, and it's a little machine. You can swipe for a credit card, and you can accept cash in Square as well, and it's just a cute little POS system that you can run on your phone. I bet Square is now, Revolut is their next step is to build a little POS system that can accept credit cards, and now they're going to get really. Square just became a bank as well. And now you're going to start to see these big fintechs run against each other at the detriment of the banks generally. It's going to get super interesting. But we've got now 15 minutes and only about 200 tweets that people have sent in that I cherry picked out of the 2,000 tweets that have come in over the past 18 hours. So can I do 200 tweets in 20 minutes? Let's find out. TSA issues new cybersecurity rules for the U.S. pipeline operators. And the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security say China-backed hackers compromised over a dozen U.S. pipelines since 2012. So they're hacking our core infrastructure, the oil pipelines. Latest hacking allegations come as Biden administration, this is from the Wall Street Journal, by the way. Latest hacking allegations come as Biden administration unveils new cybersecurity rules for pipeline operators. And to reiterate, they have new cybersecurity rules for pipelines. So to prevent them from being hacked, because these pipelines don't know how to stop themselves from being hacked, obviously, and then now there's new rules. So you have to follow the rules so that if you do get hacked, at least you follow the rules. And you need to follow the rules because they just revealed why is because the FBI and Department of Homeland Security say China hacked a dozen U.S. pipelines since 2012. Good time. Our good buddies over there in China. So next up, we've got wildfire burns across California, Oregon, and Canada. This synoptic pattern is pushing all of the smoke east, and this is coming from Dan. Thank you, Dan. I'm just retweeting it now to the Tech News Twitter account. You can see the map of the apocalypse unfolding across America as we've started fire season 2 months early. And boys, September is going to be
Also,
fantastic, everybody. It's going to be
Minnesota.
also, it made the gray skies made it all the way to New
correct.
York and DC
Yep, that's
from the
what the
West
map
Coast.
shows. You can see the map at the Twitter account TNATW. Mid-Atlantic and North England getting hit hard from the fires in California, Oregon, and Canada. And fire season is started 2 months early as a little preview, as a little warm-up, you might call it. A little warm-up. It hasn't even started yet. You
And
think
on
it's
top
bad
of
now?
that,
This is the rehearsal for the fire season that starts officially in September and October. Go ahead, Lakeisha.
Yeah, yeah. No, on top of that, so places like Minnesota that never really experienced the after effects of fire, smoke from fire, they're also in semi-drought conditions in the land of 10,000 lakes, right? So it's one of the states on, the chain of Great Lakes in North America, and people are living as if they're living in, parts of California or Arizona where there are water restrictions throughout the state of
Mm,
Minnesota right now as they're being inundated with the
mm.
smoke from the fires. Yeah, and they have no idea what's happening, so they're saying, what's going on? Like, what do you mean I can't water my grass on a Tuesday? And then, do you smell something in the air? Why does the air look like this? I mean, this is completely new for people in that part of the
Yeah.
United States. And it's not going to be the last
Yep.
time.
So, Canada used facial recognition on 3 million travelers at Toronto's airport, experts say, with no public discussion in advance. And I got news for you. Everybody's doing it at every airport. And when Charles joins us again tomorrow, he can tell you that himself because he's the co-founder of the system. So, what else do we got? Square launched Square Banking, which offers savings, checkings, and loan services to Square merchants, which we kind of hinted at in the last conversation, but now it's official. And we knew that because they got their banking paperwork in order, got approved a couple months ago, the day before they bought Titled, and that's not a coincidence. And you'll find out why more if you join us every day here. But going on with the more interesting headlines that people have been tweeting in, we've got 70% of EU's charging stations are found in just 3 countries. Anyone want to guess which ones? It's obvious to me, but perhaps not to everybody who doesn't work there.
Norway must be one.
70% of the charging
Norway,
Germany.
no,
Sweden.
70% of the charging stations are concentrated in the Netherlands, France, and Germany, in that order. And then we've got, I'm tweeting that out. You can see the actual map of where all the charging stations are in Europe, although there are huge plans to absolutely carpet Europe in charging stations very soon. And although you might not need one, if you get this next headline about the rad power bikes reveal more user-friendly next-gen e-bikes called the Rad Rover 6 Plus, and e-bikes are exploding, and bikes are exploding because of COVID, because people don't want to ride trains or taxis. They're worried about this virus, this flu that's going around. So apparently people are getting sick, and people don't want to get close to each other on trains and in cars and in taxis, so they're riding bikes. So there's no more bikes. All the bikes have been gone for a while, and now people are realizing, shit, I'm out of shape and can't ride a bike. I need an e-bike. And so e-bikes are exploding, and so are e-bike sharing programs, like the founders of SoundCloud, Alex and Eric, who are Swedes, who moved to Berlin, who are now launching their new e-bike sharing company called Dance. It goes on and on and on. E-bikes are going to be huge, and e-bike sharing platforms are going to be huge, and Alex and Eric are going to make a ton of money on that. I couldn't be happy for them because they're nice guys. And then you've got weak U.S. privacy law hurts Americans' global standing. Unrestricted data collection and selling doesn't just harm citizens at home, it's terrible foreign policy, because the data is going willy-nilly. All that sweet, sweet, juicy, juicy data is just splishing and splashing all over the place, and we need to keep tighter control of it, like China does. They figured that bit out a long time ago, and they even consider it a national security issue, all of this tech data of these tech companies, and they should, and America should too, but we don't, and that's why the data is splishing and splashing all over everybody. And that's why the Pope, not the Pope, but that leader of the Catholic Church just got busted for going to gay bars, because that data is splashing everywhere, and he just became a victim of it himself. And that was one of the headlines 2 hours ago. Scientists may have solved a 20-year-old mystery on supermassive black holes, because there's a huge black hole happening currently that they just captured. And some of the data coming out of that thing is being very helpful indeed. Astronomers can blame supermassive black holes for galaxies' semi-retirement from active star-forming phases. And now scientists have figured out a 20-year-old mystery, which you'll have to read. I just tweeted it out at the Tech News Twitter account at TNATW, which you should absolutely join. And then a new startup, not so new, a 15-minute grocery delivery startup. 15 minutes! As if you couldn't wait 30 minutes to get your groceries delivered. 15-minute delivery, powered by local stores. It's called Joker, Jokr. They joined the 15-minute grocery race, raising $170 million from our friends at Tiger Group Global. And YouTube's newest monetization tools we talked about. YouTube's got this hot new way for content creators to make money, where people can now basically leave a tip if they like the video. And if they leave a tip and like a video, they can leave a comment, and their comment gets seen as the highlighted comment. So if you want your comment to be seen on a YouTube video, you can now pay for that. And that's the secret little double win-win. The content creator wins, and you, as the person who clearly hated that video and want everyone to know how that creator was wrong, can now you have your comment seen. Harrowing report on plastic pollution says we have 29 years to save the ocean. A journal article and report issued simultaneously point to a difficult path towards reducing plastic pollution. And that was just tweeted out to the Tech News Twitter account. The cybersecurity TSA is about to announce new ransomware protection requirements for pipelines. We just covered that because they just announced that China's been hacking the pipe since 2012. And now they're figuring out they need to work with these pipelines and teach them how to protect themselves. Not a bad idea. Only nature, through significant rain or snow, can extinguish the huge Oregon fire, officials say, according to the Washington Post. The kind of weather needed to contain the bootleg fire in Oregon is not expected in this part of Oregon until the late fall when it starts raining again, and it's such an out-of-control fire, we're going to have to wait for it to rain again to bring it under control. There's not enough people on the planet to put it under control. Halo app is getting a ton of buzz at the moment. The hot new private ad-free social network from two early WhatsApp employees just launched, and it's the new little cute social app du jour that people are going to try. And then one of the founders is going to get exposed that they did some nasty stuff on YouTube 5 years ago, like the big last distro app that came out 3 months ago. And Facebook, doesn't like these new little social network apps coming out. And Magic, oh, what do you know? The founder gets caught up in some stuff, and they get canceled. And bye-bye social network. Didn't have to buy you. We canceled you. Isn't tech fun in 2021? Inside Neumann Marcus's $500 million tech investment. After a rocky few years, the luxury American retailer Neiman Marcus is hoping that personalization, that means customization through algorithms, faster delivery, and tech-enabled stores will enhance its value proposition because they are an old-school dinosaur of a brick and mortar trying to compete with e-commerce. Good fucking luck with that, my friends. Good luck indeed. Yes, you can try and digitize. Yes, as the article says, you can hope that personalization and faster delivery and tech-enabled stores will help, but competing with e-commerce is going to be tricky, as Neiman Marcus is about to find out. If they don't fully embrace e-commerce lickety split, then they won't, because they're an old, retail dinosaur, so they're going to die. So next headline is China will allow tax deductions as predicted. Here we go, another I told you so. China to allow tax deductions for expenses on children under 3 as part of a major relaxation in the childbearing policy to stem a dramatic decline in birth rates in China. And so when China announced that their birth rate data, which they mysteriously withheld for the previous 2 years, and now we know why, because it's much worse than anyone imagined, and that's why they withheld the data, even though the entire rest of the world was like, hey, China, why aren't you sharing with the rest of the world your birth rate data like everybody else does? And then they did release the data, and it's really, really bad. They got a wildly aging population. It's a tragic economic problem indeed. And I predicted not only are they going to relax the policies around, the one-child policy, which they did. You can now have 2 kids, now even 3. And I said, you know what? They're even going to give tax incentives. Do you remember that, Cheryl? Did Cheryl jump out? Maybe she did. Yes, right,
I
I
did.
did. And now the headline says as much. So another prediction come true. They're going to offer tax benefits for people having kids, which was an easy prediction, as I said at the time. Square banking is live. We covered that one. Thank you to Evan for that one. Apple delays office returns by at least a month as Delta comes back fast and furious, kicking everyone in the ass, and now you can't go back to work. Welcome to phase 2, Electric Boogaloo, where Delta is now going to sweep across the U.S., and this time it's different because when the first big initial wave of COVID came, nobody was vaccinated, and lots of people wanted to be but couldn't because the vaccines didn't exist. This time it's different. You've got 50% of the country is vaccinated because they wanted to be, and you have 50% of the US unvaccinated because they don't want to be. And here comes Delta, and it's going to have some really fun Darwinistic effects that people will study for generations. That's going to be fun. And the hidden toll of shipping is a really interesting article. The new report tracks just how much shipping-related emission retailers like Walmart, IKEA, Amazon, and Target are responsible for. Wow, from Gizmodo. That's a hot one. Let's bookmark that one and come back to that. I'm curious what percentage of. And Verizon is switching to Android messages as the default messaging system, joining T-Mobile and AT&T, and now Verizon are all joining Android messages as the default messaging system in replacing SMS. That's kind of wild. And so Android's got a bit of a coup going on there in Android messaging because all of those apps couldn't make their own independent one. Verizon couldn't make Verizon message system because it wouldn't work with AT&T, and T-Mobile could make their own, but that wouldn't work with Verizon. So they all agreed on Android. Makes sense, and a nice win for Android on the default messaging system replacing SMS. And then Aaron, you've got this one about IBM's new AI tool figures out exactly how much carbon each tree can capture using LiDAR. To calculate the size and species of each tree gives a more exact picture of how big and offset trees are providing. And then the natural next thing to do is to figure out how fast each tree grows and then cross-reference that with how much carbon it captures. And then you find out that bamboo is the best thing to do and spread bamboo willy-nilly all over the planet to reduce, because it grows so goddamn fast. It takes only like a week to grow a bamboo tree, relatively. So rather than years. And so we need to cover the planet in bamboo as fast as possible. It is absolutely mathematically been figured out as the best, most efficient way to reduce carbon out of the atmosphere. Let's get on it. So if you are interested, Chris and I and others are going to approach some of my billionaire friends who have set up billionaire funds to reduce carbon out of the atmosphere. And this is mathematically the best possible way, least friction. We get in an airplane with a big urn, we say it's our grandma's dead ashes, and we spread bamboo seeds willy-nilly all over the place and grow bamboo forests as fast as we can, because that is mathematically the best solution to getting the carbon out of the atmosphere. If you're in, let me know. We're going to do it. And I've got 2 different billionaire friends with billionaire funds specifically aimed at reducing carbon from the atmosphere, and this is the best solution. We just have to test it, show a little data. They'll jump in. It's going to be fantastic. And we'll have millions of dollars to spend to do this globally. And we got to brainstorm, think tank around the most effective way to cover the planet with bamboo seeds and get the vehicles to help us do that. Drones, perhaps, some big drones. I don't know. If you got insights, if you got ideas, let me know. So, but thank you for that one, Aaron. And then Evan, you've got one about Tesla's full self-driving software alarms safety advocates because it's not really full self-driving yet. And people, it says the title is full self-driving. The FSD beta 9. It's the 9th beta of the full self-driving. So it's still beta. In all fairness, we didn't say it was ready. It's not mainstream. It's still beta 9. So, but yet people think it's supposed to be full self-driving, but it's not. And that's what's causing all the security problems. Thank you for that one from Evan. And, we're 2 minutes over. So last one. Here's how China's largest freshwater lake has been scraped, scarred, and left fragile. We've run out of time, and we're running out of water, which means we're running out of power, and we're going to run out of food. So, just your friendly little wake-up call. And we will pause there, as I still have hundreds of articles to get to. Jesus, man. There's just not enough time, but I got to eat and use the toilet and go do my things. So we're going to pause, and we will meet again in 5 hours. Sound good? It does. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to everybody
Thank
for another
you.
Perfect.
Tech News.